The meeting is being live streamed. If you want to film, you can, but I'd be grateful if you could just notify me if you plan to do that. No. Can you make sure mobile phones are turned to silent? Thank you. And so I'll start with apologies. I've just got one apology, and that's from Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Simon Ottino is substituting. And now moving on, do we have any declarations of interest on any of the items? Councillor Upton.
Hi, yes, so I am a member of and a trustee of the Oxford Preservation Trust who commented on several of these, but I take no part in those discussions and come with an open mind. But also today I have a 1 hour a week contract with Christ Church College teaching their students, and since they are part of the applicant team for one of the items today, I will step out of the room for that one.
Any others? Councillor Roll.
Thank you. As a Doddington Ward councillor, I will be stepping out for the Doddington Rec Path item at that point, especially since I've just had many conversations with residents about that for a long time and have made my opinions and thoughts on that issue quite clear.
Anybody else? Councillor Court.
And just for transparency, I'm a resident of Barton Park and have been involved in the group looking at road safety issues there and the safer crossing at the A40.
And I also have a personal interest in the last item because it's my own property. So I will be leaving the meeting then, and Councillor Farweather will be chairing it then. Thank you. Now move on to item 3, which is East Point in Littlemore, and Jennifer's going to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin my presentation, I just have one verbal update to make. The travel plan monitoring fees to be paid to the County Council, as set out in the list of planning obligations, has been reduced from 13,060 down to 6,530. This is to cover one framework travel plan and one full travel plan for the whole site, rather than 3 full travel plans for each building, plus a framework travel plan. This change has come about following discussions with the applicant and a further understanding of how the multi-storey car park would be managed.
Thank you.
So this full planning application relates to East Point Business Park.
Sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Modern.gov seems to have stopped working, which means several of us don't have any access to the papers, which I assume we need to resolve before we can move on.
Yeah. Oh dear, sorry, I'm sorry for this.
You can access from the City Council website instead.
So could you just give us a second to do
Yeah, sure.
Barbara, have you managed to access the papers? Okay, thank you. Can we start with the presentation? Is that okay? Okay, thank you. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so this full planning application relates to East Point Business Park, an existing Category 3 employment site that extends to approximately 1.5 hectares and is accessed off Sandy Lane West at 3 points, with 5 two-storey buildings in office and clinic uses. The remainder of the site is dominated by surface car parking. Trees and soft landscaping border the perimeter of the site, and the site is bound by the Eastern Bypass to the northwest, the Oxford Academy School to the southwest, and Northfield Industrial Park, a Category 2 employment site to the south. The application proposes to demolish the existing buildings and erect 3 four-storey laboratory and office buildings, varying in height from 18 metres to 22 metres. Within the ground floor of one of the lab buildings, a dedicated learning lab would be tailored to the needs of local school children. A single-storey pavilion building at 4 metres in height would provide a flexible space with servery and toilets that has the potential to offer space for community workshops and events, public meetings, staff collaboration, and informal breakout space. One 3-storey demountable multi-storey car park would front Sandy Lane West and vary in height, reaching a maximum of 22 metres, including mechanical plant screen. The proposal would deliver a gross internal area of 20,730 square metres. The multi-storey car park would be accessed by car via a partial 2-way southern entry point off Sandy Lane West and would accommodate 299 car parking bays, with 4 accessible bays provided externally to the rear of the pavilion building. 8 visitor spaces would be provided on site. The multi-storey car park would also accommodate 280 cycle parking spaces, with 50 spaces located externally throughout the site and 15 electric scooter spaces adjacent to the external cycle parking. The multi-storey car park would also house a bike repair area, water tanks, and plant room at ground floor. The applicants would carry out improvement works and resurface and widen the cycle and pedestrian lane along Sandy Lane West and enhance lighting and widen the underpass where possible. Double yellow lines would be extended along Sandy Lane West to help avoid unauthorised parking, and 2 road humps would be installed to reduce vehicle speeds. In order to reinstate the 5A bus service and enhance the site's sustainability, the applicant would carry out works to bring the bus turnaround area on Long Lane back into use. These works include the removal of existing bollards, curb realignment to allow a double-decker bus to turn, resurfacing and installation of street lighting. Details of these works would be secured via a 278 agreement with the Highways Authority. So these are the site photos. This is the central vehicular access, which is accessed off Sandy Lane West. As part of the proposal, this would be closed to vehicles and accessed only by bicycles and pedestrians. This is the easternmost entrance point that would be used to access the multi-storey car park. This is the entrance to Oxford Academy School, and this just beyond is the Northfield Industrial Estate. And then here off the screen is the Northfield Hostel residential scheme that's under construction. This is again, the middle access, but it shows you the relationship with the Eastern Bypass and the existing footpath that would be widened as part of the scheme. And this is the boundary, the tree line boundary, bounding or adjacent to Oxford Academy School. And here you can see it wraps around there. Those trees would be retained as part of the proposal. And this is the westernmost access that would be retained and used as the servicing route. And this is the cycle path that leads onto the underpass and the side access to Oxford Academy School. And this is the underpass that would lead to Long Lane, just north of the bypass that would be enhanced. And again, this is the side access to Oxford Academy. So the typical floor plans would comprise lab and office space with associated plant rooms, changing rooms and toilets. The application is speculative, so floor plans are not detailed at this stage. This is building 3 that adjoins the multi-storey car park. The ground floor would comprise the same facilities as buildings 1 and 2. This is the first floor plan of buildings 1 and 2, which is typical of each building. Again, it's not detailed, but it would be office and lab space. As I mentioned earlier, the applicant has committed to providing a dedicated learning lab for use by school children in the local area. This indicative plan shows a learning and breakout space, a lab area and toilets. Plans would be developed in consultation with the River Learning Trust. This is the floor plan for the pavilion, and the applicant has committed to providing flexible space with servery toilets, which would be available for the public to use, and this public use would be secured within the Section 106. Again, a typical floor plan of the multi-storey car park. This slide shows the site sections, illustrating the variance in height throughout the site. Care was taken during the pre-application process to ensure that the amenity of future Northfield House residents is not impacted, which is here. Northfield House is just here. And as such, the design was amended to increase the setback from Sandy Lane West and partially decrease the height of the multi-storey car park. The development is formed of separate buildings, which helps to break up the mass and allows permeability through the site for tenants and visitors, and enables the development to feel open rather than defensive, which is something officers and the applicant team worked hard to avoid during the pre-application process. The buildings are characterised by horizontal banding and curved corners, with the horizontal banding's significant depth enabling planting. This facade planting would help soften the appearance of the buildings, as well as enhancing the site's ecology. The form of the flues appear as a continuation of the horizontal banding across the building, which results in a cohesive design and also works well with the curved corners of the building. Integrating the flues into the elevation design is always encouraged by officers, and it gives the lab building a strong narrative and celebrates the building's use, helping to create an identity for this new development. This is a verified view on Sandy Lane West with Northfield Hostel here. You can see the multi-storey car park and how it is set back. There is actually a little pocket park fronting Sandy Lane West there. This is from Long Lane, north of the Eastern Bypass. And just here where the bollards are is the bus turnaround area that would be enhanced to reinstate that 5A bus service. The application site lies approximately 250 metres west of the Littlemore Conservation Area at its nearest point and forms part of the heritage assets wider setting. The proposal would be visible from around the junction of Cowley Road and Champion Way, as you can see here. The applicants have sought to mitigate visual harm to the conservation area by varying the colouring of the two main buildings and reducing the massing, reducing the width of the flues and pulling back the plant screen from parts of the western side of the building. However, the development would still be visible and appear as a large urban form of development, eroding the open character of the conservation area. However, accounting for the fact that the development would only be visible from part of the conservation area, the impact is limited, and officers consider the resultant harm to be a low level of less than substantial. A low level of less than substantial harm would also be caused to the significance of St George's at 31 Cowley Road, which is Grade 2 listed, and Dormercroft, which is also Grade 2 listed, as the proposal would go some way to eroding the character of the listed building settings in the same way that it would to the setting of the conservation area, and that it is less open. In accordance with paragraph 206 of the MPPF, it's considered that the pressing need for high quality lab enabled office space within this part of the Golden Triangle provides clear and convincing justification for the heritage harm caused. Further, in line with paragraph 208 of the MPPF, the public benefits flowing from this development, including the local economic uplift, a commitment to employ a proportion of local residents, enhancements to the pedestrian, cyclist and bus infrastructure, the provision of a school lab, a 10% net gain of biodiversity on site, and a 40.9 reduction in carbon emissions would collectively outweigh the low level of less than substantial harm to the setting of the Littlemore Conservation Area and Grade 2 listed buildings. So in conclusion, officers consider that the proposed development would respond appropriately to the site context and the local plan policies as a whole. It's therefore recommended the Planning Committee approve the application subject to the Section 106 legal agreement and finalisation of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I understand that we've got two speakers who want to speak in favour of the application. If you could come forward now, and you will have 5 minutes between you to make your presentation. Yeah, and that are the two of you, and you're okay. That's fine. It might be helpful if you sit there so that if anyone's got any specific questions of you, thank you. Okay, so I'll open that up to councillors. Councillor Altaf Khan.
There's talk from Long Lane improvement, underpass, a number of other improvements in the area. But from the presentation and the talk, it doesn't look like anything from the Eastern Bypass entrance and getting out. And people who travel there, they know how much traffic is, and surely this will cause extra traffic going in and out, and cyclists. So how do we deal with the Eastern Bypass entrance just at the front?
So traffic generation has been measured and it's been assessed, and the Highways Authority have confirmed that given taking into account the additional traffic flows, the junction would still be working well within capacity. So they're not concerned in terms of a highway safety perspective. And you're talking specifically about that junction with the Eastern Bypass onto Sandy Lane West. Yeah, so we have confirmation from the Highways Authority that would still be acceptable.
So it stay as it is, no changes to traffic or the
No.
cyclist or anything?
No, not that junction.
Any other questions? Simon, Louise, Alex and David.
Just a question about the school use. How are we going to be able to enforce that and make sure it's happening? And do they, imagining that being the local primary schools as well as the secondary school, and there didn't seem to be direct access from Oxford Academy to the site apart from going around the front. Have they thought about that at all? Yeah, I just need to know a bit more about that, I think.
So we would secure that by the Section 106, that there is a learning lab and it's accessible by the school children. We'd also condition a management plan. So how is that space going to be managed? How is it going to work in reality? During the pre-app process, the applicants were very keen to engage with the school, and they did on a number of occasions, but it was the school who chose not to have a direct link into the site. They were worried about antisocial behaviour. So the applicants did try, and they wanted that physical link, but it was the school who decided against that.
Follow up. You mentioned that the space will be designed in conjunction with the River Learning Trust. I'm assuming that it will be available for all schools within the city.
Yes, sorry, I didn't answer that part of your question. It would be available to primary schools and secondary schools. Yes, yeah, it's not just confined to the local area or to secondary school children.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay, Louise.
Mine's going to be about the same thing. It was just some reassurance, because it sounds like a really good idea. And I wondered if is it based on something that's been tried somewhere else? Like, are we confident it could work?
So I know that it has been tried in Camden and it's worked. But the applicants might be better placed to discuss this, whether they have personal experience with the Learning Lab, but they have worked in the past in other areas. So we're very hopeful, and it is such a positive benefit of the scheme.
Yeah, sorry, our clients have a similar proposal up in a property that they run up in Cambridge, where they run with the local trust, and it's extremely well used.
Thank you. Alex, Councillor Hollingsworth. Okay. David, Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. I see that the SIL will generate, what, £450,000, which is majority of which will be earmarked for the Cowley branch line. But to mitigate some of the problems on Sandy Lane West, where we've had some very serious traffic accidents in the near future recently, is there a possibility that some of the SIL money could be used to develop a raised zebra crossing to protect students and to mitigate problems in that area?
I mean, with regards to SIL, we can't earmark where that funding is specifically going, but there is proposals for pedestrian crossings across Sandy Lane West. I don't know if they're raised, but adjacent to the school, John Fisher School, and then as part of the Northfield Hostels residential scheme across the road, they are also going to provide pedestrian crossing. They're going to do those works themselves. The that Northfield Hostel development has commenced, but they haven't started those highways works. They are in talks with the Highways Authority at the moment regarding the detailed design.
One more question.
Go ahead.
So it's to do with access. I've done a little bit of research with county, and it appears that the bridge that spans Barnes Road to the Lees has a weight restriction of 7.5 tonnes, and a double-decker bus weighs in the region of 13 tonnes. How are we going to overcome that problem of accessing the site with a bus route?
The Highways Authority have made their response and they haven't raised an objection in highways terms, so I assume they've taken account of that bridge. I'm not personally aware of the weight restrictions, and I can't answer that question fully tonight, but the Highways Authority haven't objected to the application. Well, I think you'd probably be better placed to contact the Highways Authority directly.
I've done that.
Have you? Well, let's see.
Rosie.
Thank you. I just had a question on the number of car parking spaces and wondering whether long-term that's appropriate or necessarily needed with the incoming of the Cowley branch line. And yeah, that's my question.
So the proposed mode share is at 30%, and you'll probably remember that recent applications for the business park, Arc Oxford, we're accepting 40% at the moment with a mechanism to reduce that down to 30% once the Cowley branch line is operational. So we're already at that stage now with this application, so it wasn't felt necessary to put that in place as part of the Section 106. The multi-storey car park is demountable, and I understand that the applicants, if demand dictates, you know, that space would be used for lettable office and lab space. So yes, we'll see, but at the moment it's considered acceptable.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Councillor Fairweather.
Could I have some clarification of paragraph 1098 in the officer's report? I was somewhat surprised to read that the electricity works needed to support the site had a completion estimate of 72 months, which is 6 years. I wondered either if you or the applicant could clarify the implications of this.
So yes, it's my understanding that they can plug into, the tenants can plug in and other operators can plug into that substation at the moment. So it won't take 72 months for them to be able to access, but SSE are upgrading that substation and that work will take 72 months. It's quite technical, so I don't know whether the applicant wants to add any detail, but the upshot is there will be capacity and service providers can plug in.
Yes, so there is a supply on the site currently. It's an existing site that will take it to a certain level. We're looking at alternatives before the upgrades are carried out, such as battery storage, which may go in part of the car park or within the buildings themselves, because the roofs of the buildings have extensive PV arrays on them. So that would buffer that interim period until full power is available.
Thanks. I don't see any more questions at this stage, so can we move into debate?
Yes.
Okay, Alex, and then I'll. Okay, okay, fine, sorry.
Okay, following from my question, my comment is that I know county, the highway authority, if they say the traffic in and out is the junction takes that traffic, but I have been very long in both council and I have heard county saying this is the planning authority caused the issues, and the planning, when it comes to planning say the highways never object or doesn't give their view. But I do know, and everybody who does drive past those area, this is quite a large and big development, and I think it is a missed opportunity to redo something on that junction. I always see people trying to get out from it. Going in is not that much problem, but coming out in the rush hour, if you see how people are struggling on that stretch of bypass. So I don't know whether this goes as a comment, but I think as a highway authority should pay more attention to this. And just sitting on the computer and saying, well, the junctions improves, well, it copes with the traffic, but if you see in real, it doesn't cope with the traffic. I just passed through, drive through, and then went to the park and ride and got here. So I do know if you go after 4 o'clock, if you go there 7 o'clock, how that stretch of bypass is looking from the Roselle roundabout up to the BMW factory, and especially this industrial bit. So I can see that we can't do much about it, but I think it's important we do say that the highway authority need to pay more attention and not a later stage blame the planning. Okay.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, I wouldn't very much disagree with that. I was slightly surprised when I read the Highways Authority comments here, particularly about exactly the junction councillors just referred to. Nonetheless, they have given their views, and their views are that there is sufficient capacity for the additional 99, I can't remember which way around it is, there's 100 and something in one peak and 99 in the other movements. So roughly 100 additional movements is what they're saying, and saying that the capacity is there. I am a little sceptical, but that's what we have to work on. I mean, I think on balance, it's a good scheme. Obviously, there's some silver baubles attached, I guess, in the form of the lab and things like that. It's not really a planning reason, but it's a nice to have. So, you know, it's good to see that. The mode shift in percentage terms is significant. So while there are some additional car movements and car spaces, it's with a tripling of the employment space. So that very number of jobs on the site. So the amount of cycle parking and the assumption of public transport use is really very good. So thoroughly endorse that. Just wanted to clarify something one of my fellow councillors said. There's an earmarked section 106 contribution for the Cowley branch line, not a SIL contribution. The SIL contribution is separate and not earmarked. But you know, again, good to see. So yeah, in the interest of moving the debate on, I will put a proposition to the to committee to debate, which is that we should approve with the appropriate conditions as listed on the report. And what's the verbal one? I can't remember. Yes, the verbal update about the travel plan. I knew there was something. So yes, with the additional verbal update about the travel plan.
I think Councillor Henwood, did you want to come in with a comment? But we've got a proposal on the table. And then I'll see if we've got a seconder. Yeah.
I too am in favour of this application. My only concern is what will be the gain for Littlemore and the community of Littlemore, where 33% of children in that community are below the food poverty line. So I would like to see a little bit more effort put into Littlemore. I don't see the Cowley branch line being of great benefit for the people of Littlemore unless it's affordable. Because of its locality, I would like to see a little bit more money spent on the community of Littlemore other than the Cowley branch line, because I don't see the real benefit for those people who live in poverty able to afford the train ride fares into Oxford. Other than that, I will be voting in favour of this application.
Thank you. Noted. Any more comments? In which case, we've got a proposal on the table to accept the officer's recommendation. Do I have someone to second that? Councillor Coyne. So I will take that. All those in favour of the recommendation, please put your hands up. And that's unanimous. That's passed. Thank you. We'll now move on to next item. which is the Odeon Cinema. And again, that is Jennifer to present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I have one verbal update for this one as well before I start my presentation. Earlier today, Thames Water removed its requirement to restrict occupation until sewage treatment works upgrades have been carried out. This is because the current capacity of the treatment works is suitable, is considered suitable to accept the flows from the development of this size, taking into account the net additional floor space. So the application site is located on the north side of George Street and is occupied almost in its entirety by a purpose-built 1930s cinema, currently occupied by Odeon. It's bounded to the east by St George's Place and to the north by Gloucester Green. To the west, the site adjoins the old fire station. Surrounding use classes include retail, restaurants and cafes at ground floor level, with residential and offices within 3 and 4 stories, the upper levels of 3 and 4 stories. The Gloucester Green bus station lies to the northwest of the application site. The site forms part of a secondary shopping frontage within the city's primary shopping area. The site also sits with the West End and Oseley Mead area of change. The application proposes to demolish the existing cinema and erect a 6-storey plus basement apart hotel with a gross internal area of 6,050 square metres. 3,060 square metres of this floor area would be given to the community space with ancillary cafe at ground floor level. The height of the building would vary due to ground levels, with a maximum height of 19.7 metres to the roof level and up to 21 metres, including the mechanical plant screen, which would be located centrally on the roof plan. The apart hotel would accommodate 145 rooms with kitchenettes, as well as a cafe, lounge, gym, laundry facilities, and a 24-hour reception at ground floor. External cycle stores for the apart hotel staff and community space staff and visitors would be located to the rear of the building, fronting Gloucester Green. An external and a bin store would be located along the Gloucester Green frontage also. The existing substation and enclosure would remain in situ, also along this frontage. The proposal includes a seating area within the public realm, which extends around the northern and eastern elevations of the proposed building. This is looking west down George Street. You can see the Odeon building here and the Faculty of History building. This is St George's Place, where the existing entrance to the cinema is. This is also from St George's Place, and it's just to show you that relationship again with the Faculty of History building. This is the existing Gloucester Green frontage and the substation enclosure, which would remain. And this is where the bin and cycle store would be located. The cycle storage for hotel staff would be positioned in this location here. This photograph shows you the relationship between the old fire station and the existing cinema, and also the largely blank facade along George Street. This is the ground floor plan. The community use would be flexible, and we don't have detailed floor plans at the moment. And this is the back of house area of the hotel and the apart hotel front of house reception area with guest leisure. This is a typical upper floor plan showing you the layout of the rooms and the varying sizes of those rooms. The existing building, as I've just mentioned, does lack activation and doesn't respond appropriately to the site's location within one of the city centre's secondary shopping frontages. Whereas the proposed ground floor would interact positively with the site's context, providing much improved activation and passive surveillance, which would enhance the public realm. The proposed large, almost full height windows on George Street would animate the street and would be a significant improvement on the existing building. The entrance to the community space is appropriately located on the angled corner between George Street and St George's Place, which would be highly visible from the public realm and would best accommodate the level changes across the site. Visual bays have been used to break up the elevations, and at roof level, the bays add vertical expression through the use of gables. This elevation responds positively to the old fire station, by bringing the mansard roof across rather than including a further gable at this bay, breaking up the proposed massing where it meets the adjacent old fire station. The coffee kiosk hatch onto St George's Place would mitigate losing the existing building entrance along the eastern elevation, with the hatch having the potential to promote use of the improved public realm. The second entrance into the community space would be located along Gloucester Green, which is very positive, as it would further promote use of this space and enhance the public realm, as this elevation is currently blank, presenting very much as a back of house. Dormer windows have been used to add verticality to this elevation, much like the gables do along the south elevation. New hard landscaping, seating and planters would be provided along the northern and eastern perimeter of the proposed building to allow the activation of the community use to spill out onto Gloucester Green and provide a much needed place to dwell within the city. An additional 6 cycle parking spaces would be provided within the public realm for use by the public. Again, this is a visualization of that landscaped area. This is a verified view from Gloucester Green, and a view looking west again down George Street of the new building. The proposal would be visible from Raleigh Park. The development would, however, sit amongst existing modern built form and would not obscure or directly compete with any of these significant towers or spires, nor obscure their landscape backdrop. Therefore, the level of harm to the setting of this view cone would be a low level of less than substantial. And this is the view from Castle Mound. The additional height proposed on the site compared to the existing building, combined with its roof form, means that the proposed development appears as a very prominent feature in the view. The proposed development introduces an atypical flat form that comprises compromises the existing skyline articulation. In this view, the building would be highly prominent and cause visual distraction, obscuring the Grade 1 listed Ashmolean Museum and part of the roof of the Grade 2 listed Randolph Hotel. The proposal is therefore considered to have a moderate adverse impact on the character of this view. This is the view from St Michael's. It's considered to have a minor adverse impact from St Michael's at the North Gate. Whilst not obscuring any designated heritage assets in this view, the proposed plant enclosure would nibble away at the base of the Western Hills, eroding the conservation area's landscape setting. From St Mary's Tower, the proposed top storey and rooftop plant would obscure a small part of the wooded foot of the Western Hills, again eroding the conservation area's landscape setting. And from Carfax, the height of the proposed building means its upper storey and rooftop plant are clearly visible in the middle ground of the view, introducing a long horizontal element directly adjacent to the tower and spire of the Grade 2 listed Wesley Memorial Church, which also results in visual competition, reducing its visual prominence. The proposal is therefore considered to have a low to moderate adverse impact on the character of the view. Taking all of the heritage harm into account, it's considered by officers that the proposal would result in a high level of less than substantial harm to the setting of the central conservation area. The proposal would also result in a low to moderate level of less than substantial harm to a number of listed buildings, as set out in my committee report. In accordance with paragraph 206 of the NPPF, it's considered that the heritage harm is justified by the provision of tourist accommodation in the form of a apart hotel, which would be the first for the city, which would, amongst other things, encourage longer dwell times for tourists and result in increased investment in the city. The benefits of an activated frontage along George Street, St George's Place and Gloucester Green, and the proposed vibrant community facility have also been taken into account. In line with paragraph 208 of the NPPF, the public benefits flowing from this development, including the community space with ancillary cafe, public toilets, enhanced public realm and provision of public cycle parking, as well as the local economic uplift, a commitment to employ a proportion of local residents, a 59.5% net gain in biodiversity on site, and a 40.6% reduction in carbon emissions, would collectively outweigh the high level of less than substantial harm to the setting of the central conservation area, and low to moderate level of less than substantial harm caused to the individual listed buildings. It's therefore considered that the proposed development would respond appropriately to the site context and the local plan policies as a whole, and it's recommended that Planning Committee approve the application subject to the Section 106 legal agreement and finalisation of conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now I've got two speakers down to speak in favour. If you could come forward, and if you're happy to divide your time up so that it's 5 minutes altogether, it doesn't have to be 2.5 minutes each, but as long as it doesn't exceed 5 minutes. You could use the mic, that's right, yeah.
Thank you.
That's fine.
I'm Andrew Heselton. I'm the development manager at Marrick Real Estate. We're excited to contribute to the regeneration of this important site in the city. Our proposals have been developed with input and engagement with the local authority and stakeholders such as Highways, Historic England, Oxford Preservation Trust and the Civic Society. We've closely engaged with the surrounding property owners, local businesses and residents. On multiple occasions, we presented our scheme at market stalls in Gloucester Green, plus holding a public exhibition at the old fire station. Additionally, there's been social media engagement, publications and stakeholder meetings, but before and during planning. This is just the start of our journey in community engagement and communications, which will continue through to completion. Just a bit about Stay City, which is a 20-year-old award-winning international hotel brand headquartered in Dublin. This scheme will be the first apart hotel in Oxford. Stay City approach is about the guest experience. The Stay City Wild brand apart hotel differentiates its offering from a typical hotel, offering the best of both worlds by combining the comforts of home with the services of a hotel. Apart hotels are particularly popular with business travellers, tourists and families who appreciate having a home-like environment while they're away. Having the cooking facilities in their rooms offers guests a desired versatility and an alternative to the Airbnb offering. There is limited food and beverage offering in the Stay City Cafe, and this helps to drive local revenue to nearby F&B businesses. Overall, we're pleased to support the planning officer's recommendations to approve this scheme, and we look forward to progressing with the next stages of the project, subject to approval to today. And now I hand over to our project partner, Andy Edwards from Make Space Oxford.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. We're tremendously excited about this unique opportunity to unlock a city centre space that is built with, by and for the citizens of Oxford, the people that live and work here. So Make Space, we're a small and locally rooted non-profit organisation. We're built out of a need for affordable space for creatives, makers, doers and thinkers. And Make Space is an organisation, but it's also bigger than that. It's a call to the city to make space for the kind of positive change that we desperately need and for the people who are making that change in our communities. We've a proven track record. And in the last 6 years, we've unlocked 30 buildings county-wide. We've supported 212 purpose-driven organisations into affordable work and community space, and we've created or supported 350 local living wage jobs. And we're demonstrating a positive vision for our high streets and our local neighbourhoods, a vision that centres people and places and our living world over profit. Now, George Street offers us a unique opportunity to build on that legacy and our learning so far, to create a space where local citizens can develop a deeper connection with their neighbours, a stronger sense of belonging with their city, and a stronger sense of agency over the changes that we need to make together. The space will be inherently open, flexible, and welcoming to diverse groups. It will be complementing and connecting with local and existing initiatives. This is not simply another community centre, but all for hire. In the last 9 months, we've been working with the award-winning Jan Catan Architects and a community advisory board of 10 local citizens to co-create and co-design a vision for what the space will look and feel like. We've undertaken numerous one-to-one stakeholder meetings, engagement events and workshops with local schools. But really, as Andy says, this is just the beginning. We have many more plans ahead to work with local communities. From our work so far, we're hearing that the space needs to be an intergenerational place where people can just be themselves. And so we're drawing on the principles of public living rooms. It's got to be a place that links to the local initiatives that already exist, that connects to the market and the old fire station particularly. And so we want it to be active and flexible, responding to events right on our doorstep. We want it to invite local groups to tackle the big and complex challenges of our times, specifically the climate emergency and rising social inequality. And above all, we want this to be a space that fosters a culture of continuous learning and active citizenship. The themes that run right the way across all of our work, but that will be particularly prevalent here, are around community wealth building, being rooted in place, using principles like donut economics and regenerative practice. So we're moving beyond sustainability to making a positive impact on people and our environment. The next steps will be about launching our next phase of engagement. We have many exciting events lined up. We'll be fundraising in earnest to ensure that the space is properly resourced, and we'll be sharing and testing these ideas openly and widely. Thank you very much. Look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Thanks. Okay, questions? David and then Louise, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Could the officer kindly point out where the history faculty is? I mean, the Oxford Preservation Trust referred to it. I'm not sure where that is within the scope of the plan.
Yeah, I'll just find it. It's across the road. I'm just going to find a site photograph for you.
Yeah.
It's this building here. So it's not part of the application. It's just
No, okay.
yeah, just highlighting
Thank you.
it to show the relationship.
The old Oxford Boys School, David. I don't know if you
No, I
got that old.
don't. South Oxford, I'm afraid.
So a couple of questions. The frontage that there is now, it's a question for the heritage officer really. Is there any heritage value thought to be attached to that? I mean, the stone lintels and that, like, it's quite iconic. So I'm just wondering, what was that considered as something of heritage value that's being lost and that to be weighed in the balance? And then question 2 was public toilets. That's fantastic. There's going to be public toilets. We'll all be delighted about that. Just wondering, are those going to be 24-hour? Do we have a management plan? I know there's sometimes issues with central toilets. So are they likely to be 24-hour? That's my question. Thanks.
So in terms of the existing cinema, it is considered a locally designated, non-designated heritage asset. And as part of the proposal, we would have the stone bas relief retained, and I've conditioned a method statement for that to be safely removed, stored, and then relocated within the community space. The exact location within the community space is flexible, but it's something that will be secured prior to occupation. And then in terms of documenting the historic interest of the building, level 3 building recording would be conditioned as well. But generally it's felt that the lack of activation along George Street is detrimental, and there is a benefit to having that activation. The public toilets, so they would be within the community space, and there will be a management plan within the Section 106 or secured within the Section 106 for the community space, which would cover hours of opening, etc. But I don't know whether Andy wants to jump in and mention management of that.
Just to help respond on that, the public toilets will be in line with the opening hours of the community space. So they won't be 24 hours. It will be sort of closing at 10 o'clock at night.
Thanks.
Okay. Simon. Yeah, then.
Yeah, just a question about the height of the building, as a few people have raised that. How much higher than the existing cinema is it? And are you able to compare the height of it with the height of the new theatre and that building at the back of Debenhams, which is pretty high? They're both uphill from it. Is it higher than them, or what's the height of those two buildings?
So the existing building varies in height from 15 to 17 metres, and the proposal is 19 to 21.5. In terms of the new buildings, I think I'll get the view from Castle Mound, which might show you where it sits. Sorry, it's taking a while. There we go. So which building are you referring to?
Well, there's the new theatre and there's the building
Oh,
at the
sorry,
back
the new
of
theatre.
building at
I
the
thought
back
you
of Debenhams as well, which is pretty high, not very attractive.
Sorry, when you said new theatre, I was thinking new building. Yeah, so it would obscure the new theatre, and it would partially obscure the Ashmolean.
Is it taller than the new theatre or taller than that Debenhams building?
Yes, it is. Yes, yeah.
Taller than the Debenhams building as well? At the back.
I don't actually know the height of Debenhams, and it's not shown on this view. So I can't give you an accurate answer to that question. But it's been, you know, we interrogated the height of the building in terms of its immediate context, but we didn't compare it to buildings further down the street and George Street. And then here in this views, we were assessing the impact of the height in relation to that, the skyline and the finer grain of the rooftops and how it obscured the Ashmolean building, but not directly comparable to the Debenhams building.
I think Diane, did you have a question? Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to take some guidance. I was a former employee of MakeSpace and until last month, a resident at one of their buildings. So I just wanted to know whether it would be appropriate for me to abstain for this round. I'm no longer a resident. Yeah.
Thanks.
Do you think it will prejudice your decision in any way?
Yes.
Then I would advise that you would withdraw from this and not engage in the debate or the vote.
Thank you.
Have any other questions? Alex?
Yeah, I have two. The first question is on the issue of planning balance and the public benefits, and one that you didn't list. When we have an application for student housing, we have as a standard public benefit of student housing the potential for it to free up residential accommodation and bring it back into use for families or whatever, private rented sector. An apart hotel sits in the same economic sphere as, I can't use the name of the big company because they send me lawyers' letters, but the short-term let sector, which is having a significant impact, particularly, this is in my ward, on my ward, with whole portions of streets now converted from private rented to short-term let. I noticed you didn't list this as having a potential benefit in potentially bringing some of those properties back into use for the private rented sector, whether it's for families or shared houses or whatever. Is that a benefit we should be taking into account in the planning balance? That was the first question. The second question, which is like gone from the very broad to the very narrow, is the proposed agreement for the potential uses of the community space includes within it, I've lost the page, but the it includes, oh, here it is. It includes within a wide range of things that it could be used for. So these are the permitted uses. So this is important, as this is going to be bound by a legal agreement. A space for the production of art. I would like to know what definition of art is. And the point of that is not to sort of differentiate between different forms of visual art, but to work out whether, for example, a performance art space or a spoken word performance, is that the production of art or is that something different? So when does it stop being the production of art with its implication that it's a visual art? And when does it start being a performance and then an oral performance and then a spoken word or a musical performance? Where does that boundary lie? And does this, because it does not include musical performances or spoken word performances, would this preclude the use of that space for those uses?
Okay, so going back to your planning balance question, definitely the potential benefit of freeing up housing that would otherwise be used for tourist accommodation, which has been considered. I didn't include it formally as a public benefit because it's difficult to measure, whereas with student accommodation, we have that, how we measure in our policy, how the houses will be freed up. So I just thought it was actually better to leave that out, but obviously, yes, I mean, could potentially be a benefit to the housing market. Definition of art. So where do we begin? There is no theatre to be provided in the space, and I haven't heard mention of theatre productions. I think it is more visual art. But we don't want to restrict the use of Make Space and what is needed in that space. So yes, it's quite an extensive list. I mean, to be honest with you, I can't clearly answer your question, but there is no theatre to be provided, and my interpretation is that it would be for visual art.
Okay, thanks. Andy, Nandi, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, not definitively for the same reasons. It's quite a broad question, but I think we're open to, we respond to need, and we respond to the desire of local citizens and local artists. We're in regular conversations with the old fire station. We're in no way looking to conflict with their operations or duplicate their operations, but we also know that they've come to us before to say we have a production and we need some extra rehearsal space, or we have the opportunity to tour a production and it could, you know, exist in one venue at one point and another venue at another point. And so I think what we try and do is take a view in the round as, is it additive? Is it complementary? Is it something that's going to create a positive benefit to the local area and the city at large? And if it is, then we'd encourage it.
And just to add to that, it would need to be an operation that would sit well with the hotel and the local residents in the area as well. So, you know, a live music gig, if you're expecting the next Oasis gig to be here, you'll be disappointed. But it is not being designed as a theatre, but Make Space will be exploring opportunities and working with Stay City as well as the space evolves. So they're both signed for 40 years on this, so it's a long-term proposition of working together, partnership in the city.
Thank you. David, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Chair. Some guidance, please. So I am aware of you can only have X number of HMOs in one given locality. Is there a measure or a rule on hotels in a given area or the number of beds in an area?
Don't think there is, but I'll ask Jennifer or Andrew to give a definitive answer.
No, we have locational criteria. So short stay accommodation would have to be within a defined city or district centre, and there are a list of arterial roads that hotels are allowed on, subject to adherence to the local plan as a whole. But we don't have a set number of hotels that we would allow in one area, like we do with HMOs.
Sorry, Rosie.
Thank you. I had two questions. One was just wondering, what is it, how late do we expect the kind of community space to be open, and what the kind of like nighttime life of this building might look like? And then also just interested to understand some of the concerns that came through from residents related to noise of operation, not just construction. I just wondered I know there was a noise impact assessment, but I just wondered what the kind of management plans look like. Thanks.
Yeah, I can pick up on the noise. We've been in discussion with Highways, local authority, police about various things, and we've taken action to move the majority of the bin stores inside the building. So it's just 2 bins for the community space, which will be in a segregated store. So in terms of servicing and waste management, it will be round to the Gloucester Green side of the building, which is where there is an existing service route already. So it sort of makes sense to have it there. We've moved it away from the street frontage because George Street is already very congested. In terms of the noise of the building itself, the noise impact assessment has demonstrated that there would be attenuated plant on the roof to make sure that there will be no worse noise from this building created. So there'll be sort of noise attenuation, which will dampen the noise of the plant. And there will be a ground floor plant room as well, which will have a number of bits of equipment, which will be enclosed. The windows themselves will be fixed, so there won't be openable windows, so there won't be a disturbance from guests or vice versa. And the community space as well will have sort of closed doors and windows. There is one openable window on the south on George Street, so hopefully that would sort of allay concerns. But we've taken on board what the residents have said, and we've sort of taken actions as much as possible to mitigate that.
Yeah, we're mindful, we're beneath a hotel and we're in a residential area. And so as much as we know there is a desperate need for independent music venues in the city centre, this is not going to be it. So we hope that there will be opportunity for events and perhaps even some performances, but it will have to be within the restrictions of the noise levels that allow for a good night's stay for Stay City residents and for the local residents.
If I may add, in terms of antisocial behaviour, I think this scheme will improve the situation in terms of the visibility. We're adding more CCTV cameras to the sites around, and we're having more activation around the building. So that will help improve that passive and sort of active surveillance and public safety around the building as well. So that should add a further benefit for local residents.
Thank you. Louise?
So we don't usually take into account who is the actual occupier of the space is going to be of a building. But I think in a case like this, where we have heard there is heritage harm, so we are going to have to be weighing up community benefit against harm. I mean, I think MakeSpace are an amazing organisation, but if, and that, you know, probably will be weighing on one side, but what if they implode tomorrow? I don't know, your entire team gets knocked down by a bus, or they decide it's not the space for them or something. That, I don't know, that could affect things. So I'm sure we're not going to condition it has to be MakeSpace that goes in, okay, that MakeSpace go in, but what is our fallback position? I mean, can we specify it's got to be somebody that gives really good community value somehow? Because if they actually decide they're just going to let McDonald's take it over, then that might change our decision.
My questions are more or less the same thing coming from a different angle.
Okay, so do you want to add to that then, and then they can be answered together?
Yeah, it was. I had, I think, wrongly assumed that the agreement, the community space agreement between the two parties, was included in a condition, and it's not, as far as I can see. So, picking up Louise's point, what are we conditioning in relation to the community space? And just to emphasise, my point wasn't to try and expand what was covered. What I was trying to avoid was to have a condition which was overly restrictive on the flexibility of the two users, which was potentially what it was. So how are we conditioning the use of the space, or are we?
So it is great that we have an occupier on board and it's not speculative, which has meant that we have been able to interrogate the design fully. But setting that aside, they have signed up for a 40-year lease. We have in our management plan the ability to, assuming it is MakeSpace, but if they, you know, fail for some reason and aren't in the equation anymore, another community use occupier would have to come on board. It has planning permission for community space, so it couldn't become a McDonald's. That space is dedicated to the community use. It's a council-owned building, so it's in our interest to make sure that the space is used by community use occupier. And I know I wasn't involved in the procurement process, but a lot of care was taken to find the right occupier. So I can only assure you that care and attention would be taken again if somehow MakeSpace didn't occupy the space. The community use agreement would be part of the Section 106 agreement, so it's not a condition. It's in the legal agreement, and we've had lengthy discussions about the management plan as well that would form part of the Section 106. MakeSpace are required to report back to us quarterly in the first year and then annually for the first 5 years, so that we can make sure that it is working as it's intended to work. So they are fully committed to this space.
Does that answer the questions? Great. Okay, are there any other questions? Can I come back on the issue of public toilets, which I think we're probably all privately very excited about, because it's an issue that as ward councillors we get lots of questions about. We know from comments that have been made before that there are very few gender neutral toilets in Oxford, and it's expensive to change ones that are already male and female. This is an opportunity to start from scratch. Is that something that could be done?
It's a policy within MakeSpace that all our toilets are gender neutral, so they will be.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, do we have any more questions? In which case, move on to debate. Who wants to kick off on this? Okay, Alex and Altaf. Okay.
Okay, I'd like to kick off as the ward councillor, so as it were. As my question suggested, it's a good exercise in the use of the planning balance. This proposal, it has harms and it has benefits, and I just wanted to run through my views on those harms and benefits. I'll start with the harms. The visual impact, particularly on that view from Castlemaine, is quite significant. We heard the officer's interpretation of that assessment, of that. And that is something we need to take extremely seriously, that potential for a visual harm. I think David's question, Simon's question, about the height of other buildings was relevant. I think the Debenhams building probably is bigger, but you could see the visual impact in the mock-up there from that view. Other views rather less so. So there is a genuine harm which we need to take into account. I think there are, on the other hand, very significant benefits. And my two sort of ward councillor elements, well, they're all three ward councillor ones actually. The first is the activation of the fourth side of Gloucester Green. It is, with the exception of Bond Square, which doesn't really work in this way, it is the only public square we have in Oxford. So it's really, really important. And like perhaps too many things in Oxford, it currently only has three sides. Those who go to the football will know what I mean. And so the chance to get that fourth side elevation with activation, with light, with ground floor activation, obviously taking into account the services, I think is enormously important. And I think that's a really significant benefit of this scheme. And, really offers the opportunity for Gloucester Green to grow on its already existing high delivery of an active, exciting, interesting, positive public space. I don't think the words exciting, interesting and positive have ever been used about the George Street frontage of the existing building. It's a miserable blank wall which detracts significantly from a really important gateway to the city. So I think in terms of benefits, that is an even greater benefit. The creation of the active frontage on there is something that is, well, 75 years overdue, frankly, or more. Yeah, that is an extremely positive thing. And I'd like to finish with the subject of my question, the impact of short-term lets on communities, particularly close to the city centre, but increasingly further away from the city centre, whether it's Jericho, whether it's St Clement's, Grandpont, and so on, is seriously detrimental. The loss of family accommodation or rented accommodation used either by families or whoever, shared accommodation, is impacting on the number of kids who go to school, the number of people who go to shops, the number of people who go to local pubs and cafes and restaurants and things like that. It is, and the social fabric is really severely damaged. I think this is an opportunity to redress some of that really significant harm that comes from that. And I would say, even though it is difficult to quantify, and Jennifer's absolutely right, it's really hard to put a finger on this. I think it is a really, really significant benefit coming from this scheme, and it weighs very heavily in my mind, even if I can't fully quantify it. All those things then taken into account, I think the benefits outweigh the harms, and that's without talking about the community space, which I think is a benefit. So that's a fourth benefit. Those four benefits, in my mind, outweigh the harms. I don't disregard the harms. It is an outweighing, and I therefore would like to move approval subject to the listed conditions. I don't know what the Thames Water update means. The condition is probably still required, isn't it? But is it not? Okay, so without the Thames Water condition, I don't offer any comment on Thames Water's ability to tell us the right thing, but they've told us that and we have to go with it. So there it is. But so with that minor amendment to the conditions, for the reasons said, I'd like to move approval.
Jemima wanted to come in. Oh, forest of hands. Oh, right, okay. We've got an offer on the, we've, a proposal on the table, but if other people have got other comments that they want to make to be taken into account, pardon? Okay, sorry, apparently Altaf, you're next. Sorry, I'm taking the wrong order.
A lot has been said on the visual impact, and I will try to be very brief. As officer, accept that there is a modest harm, or the modest, in a way, the overlooking from the Castle Mount and other places. As is being said, I think it is very serious. It is a matter of judgment. Some people would say it's a modest, some people would say not, it is not a modest. But if we are, as a planning authority and representing this city of spires and universities and the century-old place, and if we look at another 50 years or 100 years and the speed, the height of these modern buildings coming, so that will no longer be Spire City, I would say. Then it would be, in that term, it would be quite a serious harm. So I know we did have this discussion in the previous application on the height of buildings, which is, again, we're trying to compare with this or that. And I think some of these work, like, because we are not drawing a full plan of the city, so some individual application comings, which does harm to the view counts of the city. So there is my concern. So I wanted to put that on record.
Thank you. I think Councillor Hunt, Jemima.
Thank you. Yeah, my point really is picking up on many of the things that have previously been said, but it's also the fact that actually, as a city, I think something we haven't discussed really is that we shouldn't be demolishing buildings. And this is actually a 1930s building, and actually most buildings that were built before the 70s can be retrofitted, can be repurposed. Interestingly, Trafford Council is at the moment repurposing a 1930s former cinema into a community asset, and has found a way to reuse the space. So I mean, I think it's fine to talk about donut economics, regenerative economy, and so on, but to do that and then not actually look at reusing a building seems to me problematic. Was there a public consultation on this building, I wondered? Anyway, I mean, we've reached this point now, but it just does seem to me that again and again, we're demolishing buildings that should not be demolished and that should be repurposed.
So, Chair, just to pick up on just 2 points. And the speaker made comment to the fact that there had been public consultation on their proposals for the scheme. And there's also been a statutory consultation process throughout as part of the planning application in relation to the development. So just there has been public consultation.
If anyone, if you want to comment on the repurposing and I know that was discussed
Yes, so I mean, demolition of buildings is regrettable, but it's acceptable in this instance. I would find it very hard to believe that the cinema would be able to be repurposed into a part hotel with community space that would function successfully. So, there is justification for the demolition of this building. But yes, whilst regrettable, it is acceptable. And we don't currently have a policy that's the word I'm looking for, prevents demolition and takes into account embodied carbon.
Rosie,
Thank you. I also share that concern as well. I was going to mention, and I recognising the difficulty of changing a cinema into an apart hotel, and I suppose then that was a decision for the assignment rather than where we are now. But my two questions, or my two comments I wanted to make. One was just sort of in response to one of the points that have been made already in the debate around whether we should consider and to what extent we should consider the apart hotel relieving pressure on the general housing situation in Oxford and people converting their homes into short stays. I don't feel fully convinced that the clientele is the same for people who may sort of holiday in a home versus stay overnight in a short work trip, for example, in a apart hotel, as one example. So I wouldn't weigh as much confidence in this having that effect, I suppose, is what I wanted to say. Though I did also, as a second comment, just want to highlight that I think the community space is very exciting, and shared comments with others around the kind of community wealth building that will bring, especially the list of activities I think will be really exciting. So those are the two things I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Louise, do you want to come back on this? Yeah.
Yeah, just one more. Clearly this is a vastly better building, but we are thinking about weighing up Heritage Hall against its benefits. We've heard several of both, but one thing that to me that is also a benefit that I don't think we should underestimate, and that is the value of passive surveillance. So that the shot on the screen there now, if you walk up, there's a patch at the moment where you've got the History Factory on one side and you've got this great blank building on the other. And it does feel a bit, in the nighttime economy, it does feel a bit, you sort of feel there's nobody here who could see me. So I think the fact that we will then have a row of windows along there will actually make that bit of the street feel much safer in the evenings as well. So I see that as a benefit too. And on that note, I'd like to second Alex's proposal to approve this with all of the attached conditions.
Thank you. I know Councillor Henwood wanted to come in, so I'll let him come in and then we'll take the vote.
Well, thank you for that, Chair. I have to disagree with Councillor Hollingsworth's assessment on the Airbnb situation. I don't think it's a material matter in this application. I respect the fact that he is a ward councillor and he's facing those difficulties, but honestly don't think it's a material matter in this case. I'm finding it difficult to reconcile the harm and the relationship the proposed development would have in relation to the conservation area and the surrounding Grade 2 listed buildings and the views from the mound, and the need for something to change in the area. I just don't think this application ticks all the boxes in terms of the way in which it sits within the conservation area and the relationship with those other facilities in the area. So I won't be supporting this application.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've got a proposal on the table, and so let's take a vote on that. That is to approve the recommendation with the attached conditions as set out. So all those in favour, please show. Right. And all those against? One against. And any abstentions? 2 abstentions. Okay, so that is carried. Thank you. And oh, you're leaving? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll send someone to fetch you for the next item. Okay. We're now moving on to agenda item 5, which is the land north of Bayswater Brook. And Andrew, you're presenting.
You ready, Chair?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so the application in front of you today is for a set of parcels of land for what we call the land north of Bayswater Brook. Is seeking permission for a package of access works that are required to facilitate the development of a circa 1,400 home residential-led mixed-use development on land north of Bayswater Brook. That site lies outside our boundary in South Oxfordshire District Council. The site was allocated within their plan to meet Oxford's unmet housing need. South Oxfordshire District Council resolved to approve the hybrid application for that development at their committee meeting last week. And then in parallel to that application, an application was submitted for a package of access works to facilitate that development. Those works straddle the administrative boundaries of the city and South Hoxton. So we have got one half of the application and South Oxfordshire have got the other half of the application. I should say the South Oxfordshire half hasn't been determined as yet because members ran out of time at their committee meeting, but we bring forward our half now for you to consider, and I'll take you through that in a moment. And before I start, there are a couple of verbal updates. Firstly, the section of the committee report setting out the Environment Agency's comments on the planning application, that's paragraphs 914 to 915, is incomplete. That I omitted a third paragraph which should have been included, which stated that the EA had actually removed their objection on the 10th of May 2024, following the submission of a revised flood risk assessment, which dealt with their concerns around flood risk and biodiversity impact. They've also recommended a number of conditions which are listed in the condition section 12 of the report. So just to highlight that. Secondly, we've had, since the committee report was prepared, we've had 2 further representations from a resident in Barton objecting to the application for a number of reasons. Those being the development will have an adverse impact on Sidlins Copse and College Pond, SSI, and that the Bayswater Brook floods, and the development will increase flooding concerns for the residents of Barton, and that the application will result in the reversal of the direction of the number 8 bus to the detriment of residents. Those matters that they raise relate primarily to the hybrid plan application for the substantive development. And then, however, the concerns about flooding from this development are addressed in the officer's report. So that's covered there. And then the third update is we would ask that 2 conditions are added to our recommendation in section 12. One of those being the submission of an arboricultural monitoring plan, and the other being the maintenance scheme for the connectivity bridges, which I'll talk about in a moment. There's a condition about the A40 bridge, but we want to also include a maintenance plan for the connectivity bridges. So there's 2 conditions we're recommending. So the officer's report sets out our assessment of the proposal against the current sort of relevant development plan policies, and I don't intend to go through all of that with you now in this presentation, because there is a sort of quite a suite of works here which I want to take you through. So I'm just going to talk through those and just to give you an indication of what we're dealing with. So if I move on to the next slide, you see there. So this slide shows you in the lighter green, if you see my cursor, the extent of the main hybrid application, which covers, as you can see, a significant portion of land to the north of our boundary. Barton Park is here and Barton is there. And that's where circa 1,450 homes plus additional commercial development is proposed. This is taken from the access and movement plan. So in addition to this, the applicant has gone through a significant period of discussion with the County Council, with South Oxford officers and with officers from this council to try to develop a scheme of access works that, one, allows suitable access to deal with the traffic generation, but also provides a number of high quality pedestrian, cycle and public transport links to, one, integrate this development with developments in the city, but also be able to provide alternative modes of transport to the car. And we'll take you through those now. So what we're talking about in terms of the proposals is we've got, I'll just go back here, we've got the main access works here on the western end. We've got access on the eastern end, which I'll take you through. Then we've got 5 connectivity bridges throughout the development. And we've got public transport links through a linkage here on Barton Village Road and through a bus priority route off the A40. And then there's also the A40 pedestrian and cycle bridge. So I'm going to take you through each of those with some photographs because it's quite difficult to help to orientate you here because we're talking about sort of main arterial routes, etc. So I'll take you through those step by step. So firstly, the western access. There are some works proposed from the A40 here and going round into Marsh Lane here, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. And then that's obviously a view down Elsfield Lane. The proposed works here, and again, it's not going to come out that clear on the plan, so I apologise for that, but there's a lot of detail. The dotted line here shows the administrative boundary of the city. So we're everything within this zone, and everything north of that is within South Oxfordshire. But ultimately, the Western Access is proposing a priority link from Elsfield Lane into the western end of the development. There's provision of some segregated cycleways, improvements, and some realignment of the current Elsfield Lane to create a better through route to Marsh Lane. The development within our boundary, which is what we're considering today, relates to some realignment and improvements to the off-road from the slip road from the A40, come into a signalised junction with Elsfield Lane that then runs through to Marsh Lane. And those are the works being proposed there. Coming to the eastern end, we'll do the two main access points first. This is a view from just at the junction with Stowford Road. The access into the eastern end will be a bit further up in terms of Bayswater Farm Road, but we've taken the photograph here because the main section of the works within our boundary relate to this section of road here. And that photograph's taken from just here. So what we're looking at is there'll be a new signalised junction turning into the development at the eastern end. The city boundary is separated here at the very end of Bayswater Farm Road, yeah. And then we're everything on this side of the boundary. So the proposal here is for slight realignment and widening of Bayswater Farm Road, the provision of a segregated cycleway all the way down the road and into the development, some works to the pavement. There's a pedestrian crossing being provided over here towards Wainflet Road, and then the mini roundabout is being taken out in favour of a T-junction. So moving on, we'll move to the connectivity bridges. And again, these are a real significant part of trying to integrate the development into the surrounding area. So the bridges here are located throughout the linear park of Barton Park. There's 1, 2 and 3, and then 2 other connections that are coming into the existing Barton development. Now they're either making use of existing connections that go out to the fields beyond currently, and I'll take you through those. So the first connection, Bridge B1, is a connection to Barton Park. This is, as you can see, this is a view from the linear park. This is within Barton Park itself. Take a shot here looking back. And the proposal is to create a connection across here into the development. So I was taking a view from here, looking across, from here. So the bridge will be created here, and then effectively what they're going to bring is a carriageway or a route through, which is a cycle lane and pedestrian footpath into Barton Fields Road, but then again across the existing linear park. The bridge works are going to be a timber bridge. This been developed in conjunction with flood modelling to try to set this above the flood zone so that you'll have a dry route at all times coming through into the site. And you can see the section there, which provides that segregation for cycles and for pedestrians. Bridge B2 is further along into the linear park. You see it's pretty much in the position where these electric cables are going to go, which are proposed to be sunken underneath the brook. Effectively, you have a connection point here. We're everything on this side of the boundary, so we're only talking about our half of the bridge. But again, it would be a shared pedestrian and cycleway that would bring you into the linear park. Now, we've recommended a condition that gives us prior approval of the surfacing, with the intention that we would like to try to knit this on our side into the existing path network on the linear park. Again, very similar bridge construction. This is Bridge B3. Again, it provides a connection across the other field. So, but Bayswater Brook is on the other side of the hedgerow here. There's already a connection in this location already, but they're going to build another one over here, which then connects into their linear park. We're again on this side. It's the same as the previous bridges. It's a shared pedestrian and cycleway coming across. And again, same design family of bridges to try to sort of knit that into the surrounding area. Bridge B4 is actually connecting to Barton, not Barton Park. There's already an existing route, as you can see, across the Bayswater Brook into the fields beyond. And that's a view there, as you can see, Hubble Close. You can see the existing footpath that runs along the brook, so the back of those properties, and that takes you up towards Fetty Place Road. The intention is to just make improvements in that junction. Again, a route across the bridge across, taking the bridge out of the flood zone. So therefore improving that with some build-up works in and around here to again try to create a dry access if there are any points of flood. And again, smaller scale, but you can see the same family of bridge types. And then Bridge B5 is a connection. I put Barton Park there. That should read Barton rather than Barton Park. And Underhill Circus. And this is the route coming from Underhill Circus. This is the route along the existing path. And the bridge connection is coming in here. As you can see, that takes you up to Underhill Circus. And I also just give you a view of Tags Gate that comes the route that comes into Tags Gate just behind the Mugger, behind the existing community centre. The reason being is the suite of works that are proposed here is a segregated cycleway in the location I showed you of the bridge. As you can see again, same family of bridge works, but also part of a wider suite of works that we've been working on to connect this part of the development. So the cycleway will come through around here into Tags Gate, but there's also a route which we're exploring up to Underhill Circus as another route that could be used by cyclists to bring people up to Underhill Circus to be able to get access to the community centre, the parade of shops, and there are some localised works in and around Underhill Circus to provide a new bus stop. So then moving to the public transport access points, we've already talked about the east and western access. So the main points to consider is this section here on the A40, which includes a bus priority route into the development from the eastbound carriageway of the A40, which I'll show you in a moment, but also more importantly and excitingly, the bridge that's being created across the A40. And then there's also a new bus link that's being created at the foot of Barton Village Road. Apologies for the quality of the photo there. Somebody's coming up. That's how early officers start, I guess, in the morning. But so it's difficult to get you a shot. So this is the eastbound carriageway. Barton Park and the Signal Junction is just in the distance here. But this is pretty much where the bus link is going to be created into the development. And then this is a view, I've put eastbound, but it's actually westbound carriageway going down towards Wolvercut Cutslow. And this is where the bridge is going to go effectively across the carriageway. So here's just a quick indication on the plans of the route. So the proposal is to create a bus priority junction in from the A40 across into the development. This will be one of the first things that are created because they're going to use this for construction works. And provides that link. There's a signalised junction here to allow crossing. And then we've got the pedestrian cycle bridge that's being created into the development. Members will recall when we've talked about schemes at Barton Park, it's been a long sort of held aspiration that there should have been a bridge crossing from Barton Park over the A40 into this side of Oxford. Through the discussions, the applicant has sort of looked through pre-app discussions to try to push this as close as possible to Barton Park so it can serve as an alternative to the road crossing. So, through that development, we've tried to get something that can serve both developments. But to give you some visual impressions here, one of the reasons why it was quite difficult to provide a bridge crossing for Barton Park, you can see the amount of land take that it's taken to sort of deliver something that provides access for pedestrians and cyclists. But this is a sort of an aerial view. And again, the intention for this design was to try to provide a landmark feature that signposts the development itself, again with a sort of a design bridge that would have sort of be very overtly appear as a pedestrian cycle bridge to encourage use. And has been designed to try to maintain the cycleways underneath that runs, it's quite a well-used cycleway. And that's another view of the bridge, which again comes back to the overall points about high quality pedestrian and cycle routes to encourage use. And then finally, at the bottom of Barton Village Road, it's intended to provide a bus public transport bridge connection. The bridge has been pushed. Originally, it was going to come straight down the road and go over into the development, but it's been pushed slightly off that alignment to take account of a listed boundary skirt stone, which is sited outside of our boundary, but in and around this location. As you can see here, it just pushes itself around here. So this will be a bus only route, but has also got a segregated cycleway, which allows links into the Bayswater Brook development. But our boundary line is here. So as you can see, we've only got a small bit of the development within our administrative boundary. And that's the design of the bridge. So in summary, the package of works have been developed in conjunction with the County Council's Highways Authority following a review of the traffic modelling that was prepared for the main hybrid application. The applicant has also engaged with officers of South Oxford District Council and ourselves at the city to try and provide a range of high quality public transport links and ped and cycle links in order to help create a modal shift for vehicles away from the car, and also create a development that would be part of the city and tries to integrate itself with Barton and Barton Park. Section 10 of the officer report sets out how all the planning matters have been balanced in accordance with the requirements of the NPPF, and officers would advise members that, having considered the application carefully, including all the representations made with respect to the application, that the proposal was considered to be acceptable in terms of the aims and objectives of the NPPF and the relevant policies of the Oxford Local Plan when considered as a whole, and that there are no material considerations that would outweigh these policies. Therefore, it's recommended that the committee resolve to grant planning permission for the development proposed, subject to the 2 additional conditions that I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. And we don't have any speakers against, but we've got 2 speakers in favour. So Gavin Angel and Councillor Glynis Phillips, do you want to come up to the table? And so you have 5 minutes between you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. So, as you've seen, this development in South Oxfordshire will have significant implications for Oxford City residents, not just Barton and Barton Park, but also residents living in Risinghurst, Sandhills, Marston, Headington and Quarry, and so on. The application is for over 1,500 homes, and this will bring increased traffic movements to the area, however people travel, by bus, car, walking, cycle, e-scooters, whatever. I do have concerns about the design of the footbridges, as I already have residents on a public footbridge being moved out of the way by speeding cycles and especially e-cycles. And I would welcome a condition which says all the bridges have to have segregated cycle and pedestrian use, otherwise pedestrians won't use them. So I observed the South Oxfordshire District Planning meeting with Councillor Rowley on the 9th of October. And not surprisingly, because it's not their job, they did not address the real issues which this development will bring to Oxford City residents. And they include the threat of increased flooding risk, in Barton especially, unanswered questions about sewerage removal, lack of any NHS provision, changes to the bus routes in Barton, and lack of detail about retail outlets. So I could ask whether this meeting would include a second condition, is that to set up some sort of officer-led liaison meeting between the City and South Oxfordshire councils, so that the implications for Oxford City residents can be considered before decisions made by South Oxfordshire. As councillors of this city, we need a mechanism to meet the needs of our residents, so that mitigations can be considered while discussions are taking place and not after decisions have been announced. So my request is for 2 additional conditions. 1, all the footbridges to be segregated, and 2, some sort of mechanism so the needs of our residents can be heard and considered. Thank you.
Mr. Angel.
Thank you. That wasn't what I was expecting. Thank you for the opportunity to come and speak to you today. The access proposals for the Bayswater Brook development follow on from the resolution to grant last week for the hybrid application for 1,450 homes. It's worth saying that within those 1,450 homes, we're achieving 50% affordable housing, of which 80% of those affordable homes are for the benefit of city residents. So this is a big win, we think, in terms of the city. The application before you today is for the access proposals for the development that was obviously seen by SODC last week. Cyclops have sponsored us and said, from a sustainable transport perspective, the land north of Bayswater Brook is the right place to put housing. The pedestrian and cycle bridge over the A40 is the centrepiece of the proposal. Located to serve residents of both Barton Park and Barton, as well as Bayswater, it provides a grade separated crossing, linking Bayswater to the hospitals, Swan and Cherwell schools, Headington and the city centre. This high quality infrastructure will ensure safe and efficient movement between key destinations, especially noting the concerns raised during consultation by residents of Barton Park about the current surface crossing. It's probably worth noting that there are restrictions around the access and ability for each of those bridges to be entirely segregated. So a number of the individual pedestrian bridges are shared and a number of them are segregated across the brook, but also across the A40. We've had to take into account residents in the city where there is a tree boundary along the southern boundary. So part of it is segregated, part of it is not. The 5 smaller bridges will be provided are all bringing access across the brook outside of the existing flood areas, which has not been capable today across the existing crossings. And in terms of the vehicular access points at Bayswater Road and Ellsfield Lane, they provide safe paths for pedestrians and cyclists, with the western access improving capacity at the Marston interchange and elevating Ellsfield Lane above flood levels. The overarching focus of these access arrangements is to promote sustainable, low-impact travel options, and we are proud that Cyclops and the local bus companies support our transport strategy. These proposals have also been independently audited for road safety in a report which has been approved by the county. Bayswater will support the growth of Oxford by providing much-needed homes located sustainably on the edge of the city, by contributing and connecting residents to schools, health services and green space. This development supports not only sustainable transport, but also long-term health, well-being and vibrancy of both Barton and Bayswater. So we'd recommend that you approve if that's possible.
Thank you. Okay. Questions? David, Alex, Altaf and Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I should declare that I'm a member of Cyclops, but that I will look at the application objectively. Would it be possible to go back to the slide of the pink bridges running parallel to the road? It was the last one where the bus access was also. Yeah. That's it. Oh. Yeah, there you go. Could you go back one? Oh no, is it the one before? That's it. Thank you. That's it. So, this looks like a really nice design. My only concern is, and I agree with Councillor, that I'd like to see some segregation between cyclists and pedestrians. I do think the e-bikes are an issue. I'm a little bit concerned about the winter months when it's dark. Will there be some form of illumination? And how will the emergency services access those bridges should there be an emergency on there?
Well, there will be lighting. There will be lighting. There's been a long discussion about this bridge with the county council, so elements of segregation would be quite difficult. There is segregation, I think, going to be demarcated, as you can see on there, on the deck. I think on the routes up, on the ramps up, they are of a sufficient and significant length so that there is visibility, so people with e-bikes can see and have got a line of sight. But again, they're not segregated all the way through. I think you get some conflicts on either either wing anyway when you come through on the different bits of segregation. And typically people will walk over that segregation anyway. So I think realistically that's, that they've covered that as much as they possibly can. As for how emergency vehicles will get if there is an accident, well, they will have to, emergency services will have to walk up the ramps to get access to it because it's not meant for vehicular access. This does link into Foxwell Drive, so there is a route through from Foxwell Drive. There's a footpath at the bottom of the ramp. So, there will be a route through, but they would have to walk up like anyone else.
Thank you.
Any, right. So, who do I say next? Alex.
Yeah, it's exciting to have a planning application for 7 bridges all at once. My questions were relating to, I'll start with the bridge that you've got up there. The sinuous design, I was wondering whether it was an engineering requirement, but I think it's not. It's a design feature from what you said. But it'd be good to confirm that, and also to confirm that the resulting wiggly tracks underneath are LTN 20/1 compliant. So that was question number 1. Question number 2 relates to the Tags Bridge connection. So if you could pull that one up, which is Bridge 5, I think. I'll do them all at once if you go back to the bit that one, that's the image. The reason I wanted to understand, I mean, there's an existing link, obviously, footpath link into Tags Gate, but the resulting cycle link there is not a straight line by any stretch of the imagination. How are you going to prevent the use of the narrow footpath from Underhill Circus to the pink bit of cycle track being used by cyclists? It doesn't seem realistic to me that cyclists are going to take that much of a deviation. So what's the safeguarding arrangements there? How's the segregation going to work on that particular design? And the final thing, just to clarify something, because there's some images in here. The county council have asked for a whole swathe of section 278 stuff, which seems to be outside the site. What are we supposed to do with that? Are we supposed to offer any comment on it, or is it just there for information? So, for example, there's a slip lane from Barton onto the A40, but it's not part of the red line. It's not a section 106, it's a 278. So presumably it's there for information. We shouldn't even be commenting on it. So that was the third question.
Okay, I'll deal with question 2 while I've got this slide up. There has been discussions about this being used as for cyclists, and we've done some work with to try to see if we can increase the width of this as much as possible at the rear of the parking area, so that we could use this as an alternative for a cycle route, because it's obviously a bit more direct, and whether that does fully need to be resolved as it is. But this has been designed to allow for that to be used for cycles. And there had been a fair bit of debate about actually whether this is actually a better route for cycles to come through. But there will be sort of elements here to try to sort of slow bikes down effectively as you come through. But it is fairly open anyway, so you can see through. So there is a bit of work being done on that at the moment, but the intention would be that will be used for cycles as well. Right, back to the bridges, the main bridge. And we might want to direct it to on the design choices, but I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? You are going the wrong way. Trying to remember my order in my head. It wasn't, I think it's partly a design choice, but also partly to try to be able to create the cycle routes through and maintain it, where you're going to put supporting columns. But again, we may want to ask in a moment, but that is the intention. So it's a bit of both. It allows a bit of a design feature, but also it allows the continuation of those cycle routes. And I believe those cycle routes will be maintained to LTN compliance as we go through. Don't know if we wanted to ask the applicant to.
Yeah, so just come back on a couple of bits there. So underneath the bridge is LM 120 compliant. That's been checked. Obviously, the bridge itself and underneath has been through safety audits. And the other reason for the sinuous nature of the bridge is partly design and also partly because of arb constraints around the existing trees that sit on the city side of the A40.
And what about the 278s?
I put those in the presentation to give you a bit of information exactly, but those are being secured through the hybrid application with South and through a Section 278 agreement.
Thank you. Altaf.
Can I find out exact location of this spaghetti bridge?
The noodle bridge.
Noodle, spaghetti, whatever you call it. Exact location on the A40. Is it where the Foxwell Drive junction is, or is it this way or the Elsfield side? Where is this exactly?
So there's, just to orientate you, that's the existing, can you see my cursor? That's the existing crossing from Barton Park. So come a bit further south and the bridge is just a bit further south here. There's Foxwell Drive is here with that area of open space. And there will be a link through here on through that open space into Foxwell Drive. And the bridge is just a bit further down here. So it's roughly about there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we've tried to get it pushed as close to Barton Park as possible so that, as you can see, there are routes through or route through here to create those kind of holistic links that people can get across there if they so wish or use the footpath. Does that help?
Yeah.
Simon.
How
So
the roads that are already exist on Barton Park, we don't know.
So the first bridge, which is the pedestrian connectivity bridge, comes over the brook into the linear park right near the play area and comes across out onto Barton Fields Road. The pedestrian cycle bridge goes across into the Bayswater Brook scheme. Again, the boundary, our administrative boundary, just sits here. Just think of the carriageway of the A40 effectively as the boundary. That's the easy way to think about it. The bridge comes across here and down into the development. But again, this is raised above the brook. The brook carries through into here. There is a bridge going over the brook for the bus priority link, but the bridge itself that we've just been talking about, I'm not going to use the term noodle bridge, but the bridge itself that's going across is raised above. So as it then comes down into the development.
Can you not get a map up with revenue?
I can't get a map, but I'm sharing the presentation, I'm afraid. But in terms of where it is,
Barton Village Road between
Barton Village Road is here.
Sweet Way and Oldwell Road, is that where the bridge is going to be?
No, Barton Village Road is here.
Barton Fields Road, sorry. No,
Barton Village Road is here.
Yeah.
The bridge is here, is outside of Barton Park. So Barton Fields Road is there. So if you come along the A40 and you know where the signal junction is to help orientate you, that's the location there of the signalised junction that takes you into Barton Park. Yes?
Yeah, I'm just not clear how the residents of Barton Park access this bridge.
They would go over this bridge here.
Where's that? Is that between Sweet Way and Oldwell Road?
Well, it's off Barton Fields Road here that's in Barton Park.
The other question is about this roundabout that's going to go about the Stoford Road junction.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? It's quite difficult to get out of Stoford Road anyway.
Well, the highways works have been developed with the county council in terms of trying to provide for the level of traffic that's going to go along this road here. And as part of that, they're removing the mini roundabout to create a T junction.
With traffic lights?
Not with traffic lights, no.
It's going to be harder to get out of Stoford Road than it is now. And there'll be more traffic there.
But the traffic lights are further down, aren't they? So
The traffic lights are further down here in terms of this junction. coming in. Again, we're not highways engineers, so that through the development of the scheme, the Highways Authority have raised no objection to it, and this arrangement has been developed. So I appreciate there might be a concern about whether that's easier to get out of Stowford Road, but again, without having the Highways Authority here, we couldn't talk about the actual reasoning why they've removed the mini roundabout, other than that they consider that's a suitable mechanism. But also, don't forget, they're trying to create also the shared cycleway that's going through there.
But when you remember slow traffic, there's a bus coming out of Stowford Road.
The traffic lights will slow traffic though instead, won't they? So the flows won't be the same.
So there's
as
no
they are.
so just to clarify, there are no traffic lights at Stowford Road Junction. Again, there's traffic lights. There's a pedestrian crossing down here near Wainfleet Road, and I believe there's traffic lights here at the main junction, which is outside our boundary that's going into the development. I hear the concerns that you've got. Again, as I've said, we're not highways engineers, but the county council have raised no objection to this issue. And they've also considered that with the main development that's been approved doesn't give rise to severe highways impacts. So I can't hear, and the committee can't sit here and design this scheme and these highways works. But I understand the point you're making. But again, the Highways Authority is satisfied with that as a replacement.
And then the access to South Oxfordshire development, and that's going to be outside our boundary, isn't it? That's not something we're considering.
No, this is all outside our boundary. Our boundary sits here at the bottom end of Bayswater Farm Road as you come down that to the bottom of the hill, effectively.
Two more things again. I agree with Alex. I can't see why anybody would want to cycle into Tags Gate. They're going to want to cycle to the health centre and the shops at the Hill Circus. So it seems it's pretty wide there. There's like quite a bit of access, I think, at the side of the neighbourhood centre. I don't understand why we're not making that a cycle track. And I suppose lastly, you're reassured that the bridges are not going to be a maintenance problem for us in the future in terms of cost of maintaining them.
Well, firstly, we have tried to get that as the cycle route to provide a range of choice for people. So the intention will, as I said, will be for that route. I'm pointing on my screen, you can't see, can you? But here, coming from Underhill Circus down to the bridge, that will be used for cycles because we see that as a more direct route. But the idea was to retain this also and keep that as an option. It's just not been shaded that way to show that that would also be used for cycles. But that is the intention and that is the discussions we've had. And what was the other question? Oh, the maintenance of the bridges. Well, we recommend a condition be put on. I think the applicant can sort of speak to that in terms of what they intend to do.
Yeah, so we've agreed a condition relating to management of those bridges whereby the management company itself will maintain responsibility for all of those pedestrian bridges crossing the Bayswater Brook going forward. Probably is just worth picking up that at the moment, the solution for the cycle is to go round to Tags Gate. There is also a piece of work to take place with the City Council around, we have contributions towards both library and GP's provisions. The intention is to try and deliver those at the Barton Community Centre itself. So that may involve some additional works, expansion of that element there, which may bring Tags Gate into the development.
Thank you. Any other questions on this, Barbara?
I just wanted to return to the flood risk assessment concerns from the Environment Agency, having witnessed huge flooding very recently, right on those paths where the connectivity bridges are coming over. And also second is those connectivity bridges that are going to be created. The current path that exists there is possibly, has anybody looked at whether it can accommodate the additional traffic and cycle on that width, because it's not that large a path from my knowledge.
So firstly, in terms of the Environment Agency, their initial concerns, I think, also wrapped up into the wider development and actually the potential for flood risk and how the brook would deal with potential flood risk from the wider development. So through the process and the modelling that's been done for the main hybrid application, the Environment Agency was satisfied that through the modelling work and the work that's been doing with regards to drainage and also in the flood risk assessment would the mitigation measures in the flood risk assessment would alleviate any concerns they had. With regards to specifically about the bridges have been designed at a certain level, so the soffit of the bridges sits above the flood levels, so that it tries to maintain that dry access through flood events. So there's been a long process of modelling work that's gone on with the Environment Agency to talk about the brook and how the flood risk that will come from that, how we'll manage that to try to maintain dry access. So that's been done through the process. And the other question was?
You've pretty much answered them, except that my concern was the current linear path through Barton Park, through there, how those bridges will sink onto that. I mean, are they coming on at a particular angle so that cyclists racing over aren't going to crash into? Yeah.
So I think the bridges have got a different hierarchy, as you've seen. Some have got segregated pathways. So some of the main cycle routes go through Barton Village Road, which is the road, so not on that linear path, and then the one that's near Barton Fields Road, which is one of the other main routes. So you need to see this through. Unfortunately, it's very difficult because obviously the main hybrid application wasn't with us, but there is a hierarchy of routes. So some of the smaller bridges that we've seen through what I call the middle of the linear park will allow for that kind of access, might allow for cycle access in the same way people can cycle down the linear path park at the moment. I think the intention is that they would, in terms of the condition we got, that they would bleed into that path works. But I don't believe necessarily assessment's been done of the amount of traffic that would go along the linear path. But that's unrestricted at the moment anyway. But what we think is the hierarchy of routes will direct cycle traffic in different points away, so you're not going to use the whole of the linear path as a long glorified cycle lane.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. But I still, will any assessment be done of the current linear path to ensure that it is able to cope with various new trends?
Well, I think the current linear path sat on the south sits outside of our land ownership. So what we've delivered on the north of the Bayswater Brook is a more significant leisure route along there. And the series of bridges we've got will be able to pull people to the north of the bridge in all kind of weather situations, and they can use our path, which is a higher 120 design path.
Yes, there are a couple of questions. One is it possible to drive a private vehicle from the western access junction to the eastern access junction? And secondly, the public transport access, are these only for public transport, or are they available for private cars and things like that?
So as you can see on here, that's the western access, that's the eastern access. Yes, is it possible for people to drive through the development from one end to the other? What I will say is that's all outside of our boundary. So again, that's not for us to be considering today, but just to confirm, yes, you can go from west to east and east to west through the development itself. And then the public transport bridge, no, that's bus only through here off the A40. And the intention for the Barton Village Road public transport bridge is for it to be bus only.
Could I ask a supplementary? How will that be enforced?
Through highways controls, through the highway mechanism order on here, in the same way you've got Foxwell Drive coming through. So that we know, we've successfully managed that, haven't we, through that? So it'd be the same mechanism for those two as we use on into Foxwell Drive.
Any other questions? Barbara, do you want to
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Simon, and then Barbara come back. Sorry.
So there's no seal money attached to this bit, but presumably there is for the massive development. Is there any way that some of that can get spent on Barton, for instance, doing up Undeal Circus? Given that they'll be using those shops and doctors.
So we can ask the applicant in a moment, but the the hybrid application, which is outside our boundary, has a section 106 attached to it, which will include certain measures that are being provided to try to integrate this development with Barton, which includes, as has just been alluded to, the potential to use the community centre to provide additional capacity for GPs, also for library provision. So that some of that work has happened. With regards to seal contributions, then obviously we could make a request to South Oxon. But again, there have been sort of discussions about what we can use to cross to work or integrate this development with Barton. But I'm sure the applicant can give you a bit more indication of what's been discussed with South Oxon. It's probably better coming from them.
Okay, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. So we've already spoken about the affordable housing, and there's an MOU between yourselves and SODC. We've got GP's contributions and the library contributions, where the initial intention is to provide those at Barton Community Centre if possible. If not, the fallback position is probably Headington. In addition to that, there are a number of sporting facilities as well, some of which sit within the city. So Cutslow and Risinghouse at Sand Hills as well. We're looking at contributions in those areas towards sports. And we're also making direct contributions towards the Barton Community Centre in terms of an electric bus. And to Underhill Circus as well. There's some works that we've been asked in terms of cycle and lighting that are also part of the 106.
Thank you. Barbara, did you want to ask another question? Any other questions? Can I just ask one about, the issue came up about segregated cycle lanes on the bridge. And I know that we've got them painted on, say, on the Cutslow Bridge, which is shared use, which seems to work pretty well. I use that quite regularly. I just wondered if that would work, if you had different colour on one side and on the other, that people then tend to stick to one side or another rather than getting confused.
I'm sure we could look at the surface treatment. Is the width of the bridge that's been restricted by the combination of the A40 and the trees on the other side. So, but we could look at that.
Okay. Oh yes, sorry.
I'm really sorry. Was any consideration given to having stairs so that able pedestrians could descend directly to Boroughmead Road?
No.
Okay. We got any, let's move into debates. I think we've had lots of questions. Who wants to? Anyone? Any? Go on, Lawrence and Alex.
In terms of segregated bridges, I'd just like to echo the chair's comments about the Cutslow shared cycle and footway bridge. It's a bridge I use very regularly, both for walking and for cycling. And it really doesn't seem to be a problem. However, it is a different coloured surface on the bridge and the approach ramps. What I would say is, though, the ridiculous bollards halfway down on the cycle side are a complete waste of time. So I would hope there's nothing there's nothing proposed for these bridges in any similar way. I'm very pleased to see the bridge at long last over the A40, and I shall be supporting this scheme.
Thank you. Alex and David.
I'm going to assume that what Lawrence just said was a proposal to support, which I will second.
Yes.
Yes. With the conditions, including the 2 verbal conditions. So, yes. That is, obviously the South Oxfordshire have made the decision on the scheme itself, so it is important to consider the connectivity. It is really important that the scheme that South Oxfordshire improved integrates with Barton and with Barton Park, that we don't end up with 3 separate communities. A lot of work has been done to integrate Barton and Barton Park. This will do the same, and I know a lot of discussions that South Oxfordshire planners have been leading have been with exactly that aim. So that's very positive. What's in front of us today is the physical connectivity, not anything else. All the social stuff has been decided by South Oxfordshire, and I'm pleased to see it. but this is the physical connectivity. Well, like Lawrence, the bridge over the A40 is the Noodle Bridge, I think, as it's now going to be, is a particular enhancement, but so are all the rest. I mean, I am concerned that the Tagsgate one, that cyclists will use it in a particular way, and that will be that. But yeah, very happy to second.
Thank you. David, you want to go back?
Thank you, Chair. So I agree with all the comments I've heard so far, but would it be possible to have a condition on it in making the bridges on the pathways segregated? Is that possible?
How would you, have you got a particular way in which you want them segregated? I mean, would it be the suggestion that Lawrence and I seem to be agreeing about, in just painted markings rather than anything physical? Okay, all right, we'll come back to that. Barbara?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I think, it clearly looks like an excellent structure, and it's a well-placed, the main connectivity, the Noodle Bridge or whatever. I think my comment is just, it's very well placed for Bayswater residents, and it's not so good for Barton Park. And I'd expect some cycling use from Barton Park, but not pedestrian use, because pedestrians are not going to distance themselves to get to the primary school across the road. So it's important to understand that without, it's important to understand that. Also, I had one other comment, which was that I would hope that at some point they would look again, you will take a look at how the A40 just north of the Headington roundabout, the connectivity there, because at some point I believe there was going to be a light for pedestrians or some, I can't remember, but it's not really well set up for active travel. And as they're doing this process, I would want them to look at that again and see how we can better connect and make safe that end of the connectivity. Thanks.
One more comment I should have made, and Barbara reminded me of it. This is an expensive and complicated bridge. We've got an expensive and complicated junction, and it's all because the county council wouldn't reduce the speed limit on the A40, and wouldn't it have been easier? Anyway, that was just a comment. It's clearly nothing to do with what's in front of us, but it does frustrate me somewhat.
I'll touch on nothing.
I know it's an effort to connectivity between three places, but those community who already exist and enjoyed the sort of a green A40 on the both side, it will completely change with this noodle bridge or spaghetti bridge, whatever you call it. So it will look more very sort of commercial than as a rural area. So I do know people from Old Eddington have made a number of sort of comments in our board meeting, but as things they are, because I don't think it's much in the city council control with this part, from just dealing with these where if the highway is not taking sort of a stance on it, that the city doesn't have much of say into it, apart from just going along the highways. But I do feel that the whole character of the A40 is going to be completely changed.
Obviously, the housing has now got agreement and it's outside our area. I would imagine that the Noodle Bridge would be invisible from Old Headington, so I don't quite know why Old Headington residents might be concerned about it. Yeah, and I am one of them, but that's why. But Barbara,
could I just add a comment to that, which is that anything which indicates that there is huge residential development on that side of the ring road is absolutely essential. So the mere fact that coming down, possibly, maybe they'll reduce the speed limit sometime, that maybe in a distance somebody will recognize that there's residential housing is a good thing, in my view.
okay, we have a proposal on the table from Lawrence, seconded by Alex, I believe. Yeah, to support the recommendations together with the conditions and the two verbal conditions. Can I see all those in favour?
Chair, does that include my proposal for segregating the lanes? I know, seconded that.
Pardon? No, but nobody seconded it, but we can ask for it as an informative, presumably. I mean, we did, it looked like it might.
Shall I give some?
Yeah. Sure.
What I would say is, I hear your point, but the suite of works that have gone through on all the different bridges has gone through a period of discussion with the County Council's Highways Authority to pick which bridges they'll have segregation on and which aren't, or which are shared. The usage of those will be different because of, as you see on that screen, where main routes from the development are, and some of these bridges are aligned to secondary routes and things like that. So I don't think it's necessary for us to put a condition on to say all of the bridges should have segregation, because, you know, effectively their bridges will have different conditions, each one of them. So I think the bridges that are shown as having segregation on have been picked for that reason. So they'll be the ones most suitable for that segregation. So I don't consider the condition would be necessary, because I think the application and the suite of works that have gone through set which ones are going to be segregated and which aren't. So I would say it's not necessary to put that condition on.
Alex?
Yeah, I was just trying to find a form of words which did what the current Cutslow Bridge does, which is it doesn't segregate per se. It uses a surface treatment that visually indicates where users should be. So I was just wondering whether we could say something probably as an informative rather than as a condition about the surface treatments helping to ensure different users interacted safely or something like that. That would cover it.
Yeah,
and
that's
that's
what I was-
essentially what the Cutslow one
Yeah, and
does.
that's what I was searching for.
Yeah, we could add that. I mean, there is a condition which we've included, which looks at some of the condition of the pathworks coming away from the bridges. So you could wrap that up in that in part. But I think it's better as an informative. And the applicant's here and he's heard the concerns.
Okay, so with that added as an informative and the conditions together with the verbal conditions, can I see all those in favour of the officer's recommendation? 1, 2, 3. That's unanimous, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Coming along and answering questions. Okay, thank you. So, oh, yes, please. Yeah, go on. Yeah. Okay, we move on to item 6, which is Donington Recreation. Oh, moving on to the last not the last application, agenda item 6, which is Donington Recreation Ground. I'm handing over to Chloe to present.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that she can't vote, we know.
Yes, we're aware of that. We're aware of
She's
that, but we
just
have waited. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think we have to carry on.
Oh, we okay to proceed?
Yes.
Cool, thank you. Before I start, I have, oh, that's ringing. I've got a quick verbal update. And since the publication of the committee report, we have received 6 further letters of representation. This includes 1 letter of support from Cyclox, who have supported the scheme from a cycling perspective. And we've had 5 letters of objection raising concerns in regards to the loss of the trees, safety risks, the reduced biodiversity net gain and flood risk implications. These are all matters that have been considered by officers in the committee report. The application seeks planning permission for the formation of a footpath and cycle path and associated landscaping works at Donington Recreation Ground. The application was brought before members of the Planning Committee for determination back in October last year, where members resolved to approve the application subject to conditions and to the Section 106 to secure the biodiversity net gain.
Whilst members resolved to approve the application at committee, a formal decision hasn't been issued as we are in the process of finalising the section 106. During this time, the applicants have decided to make some amendments to the proposed landscaping, both on-site at Donington Rec and off-site at Greyfriars School. And as a result of these landscape changes, the overall biodiversity net gain has been reduced. In addition to these changes, information regarding the landscaping details, an ecological management plan, a construction environmental management plan, and details of the proposed luminescent discs have also been submitted to negate the need for these to be discharged as conditions post-determination. The application site relates to an area of public open space which is used for sports and recreation. The site is currently home to Donington Football Club. It is bound by trees, including a strong mature tree line which runs along the western boundary along Meadow Lane. The surrounding site is predominantly residential with Carroll Road to the east, Meadow Lane running along the western boundary and Freelands Road to the north, and Boundary Brook runs along the north of the site. To the south of the site is Iffley Academy playing field, and as you can see from this aerial view, there is an existing desire line which cuts across the field from the existing entrance at Carroll Road to the existing entrance at Meadow Lane, which has reduced the ability for the field to be used for at its full purpose for its football club. The proposal seeks to install a 3-metre wide shared footpath and cycle path which will run along the southern edge of the site, connecting the existing Carroll Road entrance to a new entrance that is proposed along Meadow Lane. By formalising a new path, the proposal seeks to mitigate and remove the existing design line that cuts across the field, thus allowing the site to improve and increase its use as for the football club. The proposed path would be a flexi-paved surface in a Stone Age bronze colour, which is considered to be acceptable in design terms. The path would be lined either side with luminescent discs at 2.5 centimetre intervals. Details of these discs have been provided and these are considered to be acceptable in both design and amenity terms. This is the existing access at Carroll Road. These are the existing design lines which cut across the field and the football pitches. At the Carroll Road entrance, the proposal seeks to remove the existing fence and install a removable timber bollard which will allow for emergency services to access the site in event of emergencies. It also seeks to install suitable highway signage, and the proposed works are considered acceptable in terms of design and are typical for what you'd expect to see for a footpath and a recreation ground, and there'd be no neighbouring or highways impacts. This is the existing access from Meadow Lane, and again you can see the desire line which connects to the existing access at Carroll Road. At the existing entrance on Meadow Lane, the proposal seeks to remove the gate and proposes to install a timber kissing gate with associated fencing. Again, this is considered acceptable in design and amenity terms. To the south of Meadow Lane, the proposal seeks to create a new entrance. To facilitate this new access, a number of trees are proposed to be removed. This equates to about 4 larger trees and a number of smaller stems. This entrance would feature a chicane and staggered timber bollards to help reduce the speed of cyclists. And these bollards would be staggered as such that they would allow for wheelchairs, pushchairs and cargo bikes to utilise the path. This is considered acceptable in design and amenity terms and in regards to highway safety. This is an image of where the proposed access is going to go, and it shows the strong mature tree line that's proposed to be removed to facilitate the new access. There has been huge public concern in regards to the loss of the trees. It has been confirmed that no category A or B trees are to be removed and no veteran or ancient trees are to be removed as part of this section of trees. And this is the same as what was previously considered by members of the Planning Committee in October 23. The applicant has confirmed that they would seek to retain as many trees as possible and will only be removing those that are necessary to facilitate the development. It has been demonstrated that the works cannot be achieved without the loss of some trees. And in terms of quantifying the loss, we have looked at it in terms of the canopy cover, and officers have calculated that the approximate canopy cover to be lost is about 275 metres squared. This is a plan showing the proposed tree works. So the proposal would also include a number of works within the root protection area along the southern boundary and some pruning works, subject to a condition requiring these works to be carried out in accordance with the mitigation measures outlined in the arboricultural method statement. Officers are of the opinion that the development would be acceptable in this regard. And then in terms of the on-site landscaping, the proposal will seek to plant 7 new trees on the site. We now have details of those trees, and these would include 6 field maples and 1 silver birch. These trees are to be planted in open areas, meaning that they have space in which to grow to their full size potential. On the basis of number of trees, the species and the location of the tree planting, officers are satisfied that there will be a net gain in canopy cover within the site. And as the proposal is considered to yield a net gain in canopy cover and would enhance the overall appearance of the park by the placement of trees in locations where there are currently large gaps in the tree cover. Off-site, so in order to secure a positive biodiversity net gain, off-site planning is required and therefore proposed. Significant changes have been made to the proposed off-site planting at Greyfriars School, with the vast majority of the off-site planting that was previously considered at committee in 2023 being omitted. The off-site proposal now includes a small area of scrub planting and grassland enhancement proposed, such that the overall score of the development proposal in terms of biodiversity net gain would be a net gain of 0.10 habitat units. There is a large reduction in the number of hedgerow units from what was previously considered, with only 30 metres of new planting proposed, such that the overall score would be a net gain of 0.02 hedgerow units. Whilst the NPPF requires planning decisions to minimise impacts and to provide a net gain for biodiversity, it is important to note that as the site is not a major planning application, there is no local plan policy requirement for the site to deliver a 5% BNG. It's also worth noting that the requirement for a 10% biodiversity net gain through the Environment Act came into effect earlier this year, and as this application predates that, it would be unreasonable for officers to require this 10% net gain. The application has been accompanied by an updated biodiversity metric, which reviews the new proposed landscaping, and this demonstrates that the proposal would deliver an increase in biodiversity net gain, and therefore the scheme is considered to comply with both local and national planning policy. On this basis, officers are satisfied that the proposed development would still achieve a net gain in biodiversity and again would comply with policy. This is subject to a legal obligation to ensure that this biodiversity net gain would be delivered. Since the previous committee, a construction environmental management plan for biodiversity has been submitted, along with a landscape and ecological management plan. These have been reviewed by the council's ecologists and are considered acceptable, subject to conditions requiring the development to be constructed in accordance with these documents. Officers are also satisfied that European protected species are unlikely to be harmed as a result of the proposal, subject to conditions. So in summary, the proposed scheme is considered acceptable in principle as it promotes and allows for an active and sustainable mode of transport throughout the city and improves connectivity throughout the city. The application would be acceptable in design and amenity terms and would demonstrate a biodiversity net gain in accordance with planning policy, and is therefore recommended for approval subject to the conditions outlined in the report and the section 106 to secure the biodiversity net gain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. Now, I understand that we have got one speaker against the application, and we've also got 3 in favour. So if you, Mr. Woodfield, if you come forward, each has 5 minutes. So that means for the 3 of you speaking in favour, you have to divide your time up. Okay, you understand that? Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to first clear up any misconceptions. I'm not here to convince you that there shouldn't be a cycle path across the Donington Recreation Ground, nor am I here to convince you that Donington Football Club should just have to suffer with damaged playing surfaces. I, and as far as I can see, all others who have objected, actually support the objectives this application seeks to achieve of a surface cycle link and an end to Donington FC's woes. There's a danger that this has been lost in the us and them portrayal that some representations on this application fall into. The matter at issue is not about if these common objectives should be achieved, but how. In that context, I speak to you tonight to represent the interests of sustainable development, good governance, and good decision-making. Your officers will tell you that your hands are tied tonight, much as they told this committee last year that better and more sustainable designs for this cycle path could not be discussed because they were not specifically on the table. I ask you to think about that for a moment. Is that in the interests of good decision-making? Would a planning application to demolish the Ratcliffe Camera for a leisure centre succeed just because an alternative that didn't require such demolition didn't happen to be in front of this committee? That may seem an exaggerated comparator, but the principle is the same. If an obvious and less damaging or destructive means to a common end is open to a decision maker, shouldn't the decision maker prefer that option? Take a moment to consider whether it makes sense for this committee to be debarred from considering less destructive alternatives because the applicant hasn't put them forward for consideration. In any event, the National Planning Policy Framework requires a decision to be taken in line with what is called the mitigation hierarchy. That requires that environmental harms be first avoided, mitigated where avoidance is not practicable, and then compensated only as a last resort. A sequential test, avoidance, mitigation, and compensation last. Local Plan Policy G7 similarly says that it must be demonstrated that harms to green infrastructure features cannot be avoided. The design before you will remove around 20 much-loved trees, rather than take a very short detour to skirt the edge of the wreck and use an existing entrance. Don't be fooled by references to these trees being stems, a group, or category C. That is little better than spin to try and hide their number and value. Instead, go and have a look at the hole this will blast in the tree line, a hole that will further destabilise the trees either side, leading to additional mature tree removals being needed in short order. This could all be avoided. Rather than take the clear present alternative, the proposers seek to compensate these losses by planting the bare minimum number of trees it thinks it can get away with on a site far away, and a minimal number of trees on Donington Wreck itself. These trees will take a generation to reach an equivalent size and carbon retention capacity. Again, don't be fooled by references to canopy cover. The applicants say the alternative cannot be pursued as it will compromise pitch space. I hope you've all read my letter, which comprehensively debunks that argument. In other words, the applicant seeks to ignore the clear avoidance option that is open to it and instead default to compensation. At the outset, this offends the mitigation hierarchy and thus offends national planning policy. It's not just issues of sustainability and good decision-making that are at issue here. The legal and other costs to this council of having to secure county council land at Greyfriars School for a compensatory landscaping scheme could be avoided by just simply taking the less destructive route along the western edge of the recreation ground. It is deeply ironic that the applicant complains that its cost constraints have caused it to return an amended design back to this committee for your consideration. What is now in front of you is a cynical and depauperate revision that sticks two fingers up at the principle of biodiversity net gain and the related advances in the planning system of the last 18 months. It's a design that seeks to get away with it just because this scheme was submitted so long ago that lower standards applied. If you vote to approve this application tonight, it won't be the end of the world in environmental terms, but it will not be very edifying for Oxford City Council. It will suggest, amongst other things, that this committee is unable to reject poorly designed developments unless the applicant has had the generosity to supply a better design alongside it for comparison. I ask you to do better than this. I ask you to return this design to the applicant with a clear direction to adopt the alternative route that your officers originally directed them towards, and which will score better on both cost grounds and environmental sustainability principles, while still achieving the common end that all, including the football club, want. Finally, if your officers advise that this is merely an amendment to a scheme that you've already voted to approve, I again ask you to consider such advice carefully. Last October, this committee was swayed by promises of a much more substantive planting and compensation scheme than what is now before you. Some members felt that this narrowly tipped the balance and overcame the concerns about the poor design at the time. The scheme before you strips practically all of that sugarcoating away. The principle of whether this design is acceptable, having regard to the mitigation hierarchy, thus needs to be visited afresh. I ask that you do that and direct the applicant to return with an approved design. Very happy to take any questions.
If you're happy to wait till the speakers in favour have spoken, and then if anyone's got any questions, we're We'll invite you back. Thanks very much.
Hello, I'm Carrie Unwin, a Chartered Landscape Architect and Project Manager for Oxford City Council for this surfaced cycleway and footpath that was received planning approval last October. The recreation ground is currently impassable and inaccessible for wheelchair users, parents with prams and pushchairs, as well as other groups of limited mobility. Cyclists cutting across the field have caused this deepening and widening series of ruts, which is now unsafe for pedestrians and a trip hazard, as well as severely limiting children and young people's sport and actually preventing all older teenage football sport on this ground altogether. Girls and women's football can't develop, and there are large numbers of children on waiting lists, all because of this diagonal rut. The current situation is benefiting no one. A new direct straight path, which cyclists like, we heard, along the southern edge of the site, approved last year, delivers benefits of this important recreation space for all groups of people. Other alternative routes have been looked at and were in the planning statement addendum on the planning portal since last year, so they were on the table. But being two sides of a triangle and much longer, these will not remove the rut at all, so don't solve the problem and are therefore sort of unviable and not favourable. The 34 letters of support to this scheme sent in from the community highlight the many benefits of this path for people. Increased access to sport for children, with all the consequent physical and mental health benefits and well-being, social benefits and community cohesion. Improved access, making the park accessible to parents with prams and wheelchair users and young cyclists, who can now, with putting the path in the park, will allow children to cycle to school or scoot to St Mary and St John's School, leading to less cars, less pollution, improved air quality and environment, both for people and wildlife. Putting the path in will allow under 17 teenagers to play football on their local recreation ground, giving them a stake in their public spaces. And the community noted again, reducing car use travelling to other sites, reducing pollution, improving air quality, benefiting both people and wildlife. Putting the path in will mean less conflicts between cyclists, pedestrian and dog walkers, all using the one straight rutted unsafe desire line. Putting the path in means a surfaced all-weather strategic cycle route OXE9 and supported by Cyclox. And putting the path in will mean female football can grow and develop. The new path to remove the rut will require part of a tree group to be removed just to put the path in. The scheme does meet policy G7 in this regard. By cutting back some of the trees in this crowded tree group to make a path for people, given the policy compliant tree replacement and gain of biodiversity, isn't enough reason to deny hundreds more children and young people the greater benefit of playing sport on their local recreation ground. Recreation grounds serve many purposes, but at least surely they have the purpose of being places where local children and young people can play sport. And I propose the committee approve putting in the path, policy compliant path in the park for the people. I'll hand over to Tim from Football Club.
Hi there, I'm Tim Foster and I'm representing Donington Football Club. We're a volunteer community club with the cheapest membership fees across Oxfordshire. We play on the Donington Rec and we serve the local area. Currently have 13 teams, 200 players, 140 boys, 60 girls, ages between 6 and 17. Our limitation currently is pitch space, meaning we lack a number of pitches. Also, we don't have the area available to have a full-size pitch, which means any of our 15 plus teams have to play currently elsewhere. We have a waiting list of over 50 players, including a women's team en masse that would like to join our club and play, but unfortunately we don't have capability to house them as yet. In terms of this proposal, the only option that satisfies the divine need of the club is the one that removes diagonal access for bicycles across the field. If the aims and objectives of the cycle path include removing the desire line to cut the corner across the field, then the only option is a straight path along the south edge of the field with a new entrance on Meadow Lane and cycling restrictions introduced to the existing northwest Meadow Lane entrance. A straight south side path is the only solution that will remove the diagonal bike rut, which at the moment, if we could remove that diagonal bike rut, it would give us 30% more pitch area, which would mean we'd have room for 3 more pitches, allowing 6 extra teams, 100 more players, and approximately 70 more families interacting locally. The worst case scenario for the football club would be an L-shaped path with existing entrance and exits left open to cyclists, because not only would we lose space to the creation of the path, which would impact 3 of our current pitches, but also, and maybe more importantly, any cycle path pushed to 2 edges of the field with a right angle corner, ultimately leading to a very obvious diagonal shortcut, would only lead to a bike route reappearing. As soon as people and cyclists cut the corner, we would not only have the inconvenience of a bike route, but it becomes a safety issue, and we're obliged to move any pitches 3 metres away as a runoff area from any rut that would form. I know we have some evidence that's been sort of proposed in terms of area of the pitch. I would suggest that some of the photos previously were a little bit out of date. We used to have a 9-a-side pitch there. There is an 11-a-side pitch there. So at the moment, there is not room on the western edge of the field to put a bike path without impacting upon the length side of that 11-a-side pitch. I think the option of moving benches is something we would very happily agree to if possible, because the honest answer for us at the moment is the amount of space that we can possibly use is our limiting factor for the field. So in conclusion, I hope that I've made the football club position clear that a straight path with a new entrance and restrictions introduced to the existing Northwest Meadow Lane entrance is the only option that the football club would and could support. This being the only option, it would ultimately lead to more children playing football and the undoubted benefits of exercise and community that would bring. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there time for me to speak?
How much time? Pardon? We're over.
That's fine.
Have we got any questions? I need to start by saying, Councillor Regisford, we started the discussion beforehand, so sadly you can't vote on this or take part in the debate. Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Questions, David and Alex.
I'm listening to Donington Football Club. I understand your greatest concern is the. Thank you. I think the battery's gone. There we go. No, it's okay. Oh, okay, thank you. I think one of your biggest concerns is the current desire line going diagonally across. And I understand that the gate at the top on the Donington side, that will close. So that would create that straight line that you would like to see. If the Meadow Lane entrance was developed, would that not create another desire line going through the football pitch to Arbour Road?
It's a good question. I know it's in part of the proposal. Maybe what's not included in here is there is already an entrance on the Meadow Lane, which isn't sort of drawn on this picture. And actually, if you look at that picture there, you can very obviously see the desire line from Cavell Road to Meadow Lane. Considering there's an open exit in that northwest corner on Meadow Lane and on Arnold Road, there is an exit, albeit it's a closed exit, so cyclists can't go through that one at the moment. There's no evidence in terms of a bike route that any cyclists would want to go in that direction. So whether it's because actually there's no demand to go to Arnold Road because most people cycling would cycle down Meadow Lane and ultimately maybe head towards the river or into town rather than across to eastern parts of Oxford, or whether it's because the Arnold Road exit is a closed exit for cyclists, we don't have any worries of that at all. And to be honest, if we did, we wouldn't be supporting the proposal.
Okay.
I do have further questions, but I'll wait.
Do you want to raise those now?
Ask them now.
You may.
So in the report, Chair, there's a reference to 20 trees. Oh, sorry. In the report, there's a reference to 12 trees and a group of trees being removed. I mean, how many trees in total is that? Is it 20 or?
We can confirm it's not 20 trees, it's 12 trees at maximum. And then basically the issue is that if I show you on this photo, is that it's a lot of stems there, because I think the trees have self-seeded, if I'm right. So there's a lot of stems, and it's hard to kind of assess whether they are individual trees or part of more stems for a tree, I believe. Sorry, can you not? It's been accounted for as a group for the smaller stems in terms of how we've looked at it.
Okay.
But it's not 20 trees, we can confirm that.
I don't understand how many trees, but I'm assuming it's clearly more than 12. Is that correct?
No, it's not. Chloe just said it's a maximum of 12, and she's explained the difficulty of counting those trees. Maybe the applicants might like to come in here as to whether how you've defined how many trees are coming out.
Sure, yes. So in our AIA assessment, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 trees, individual ones, in a group cluster, which is the willow.
How many stems in the group cluster? On page 175, Chair, it does say 12 trees and a group of trees.
And that's, I understand that's what we're looking at now, so it's.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, it's not helpful for people to call out from the back, so they just ask they refrain from doing so. Just ask that they refrain from doing so. Secondly, the report sets out, as Chloe said, it's 12 trees. They've highlighted that there is a group, but it's not. We're not considering that as a number of trees. That's why there's 12 trees. That's set out in the report and set out within our agricultural method statement. There's not much anymore we can add to that.
I'll just add one thing in that we do have the tree officer comment, and he believes there are 4 larger trees being removed and a number of additional smaller stems. Obviously not defining that because, as Chloe's explained, that's hard to. And so therefore, that's why we've looked at the canopy cover, because that gives you, I suppose, an easier comparison. If you look at the canopy area lost rather than the stem numbers, because the stem numbers exaggerates the impact, in the tree officer's words, as opposed to looking at the canopy cover. So I suppose the point being, you could say it's almost immaterial how many trees are coming out. Let's look at the canopy cover and ensure that we're getting the correct canopy cover going back. And the tree officer has confirmed that we will be getting a greater level of canopy cover almost immediately because of the trees that are proposed to be going back in.
Well, I think that actually is getting closer to my point, because if you count the group of trees as stems, are you also counting their canopy cover as well? Because that will have an impact on how you assess the biological impact gain on it. So, I mean, I'm struggling because the report says a group of trees. It doesn't say stumps, it says trees. I mean,
So just to clarify, but the report talks about the canopy cover that's being lost, sets out the percentages being lost.
Yeah, I'm not sure if canopy cover is the right way to evaluate the net loss on the area, because I haven't seen in the report what the net gain would be on those canopies that would be planted outside of the site on Greyfriars School. Is that
That's a statement rather than a question, isn't it?
Yes, it is a statement. It's not a question.
Yeah. I've got 2 questions. I would observe that willows are by definition multi-stemmed trees, and I mean, depending on what they've done, they could all be the same tree. But, somebody needs to do a DNA test to find out, I guess. The questions I had, two questions, and I appreciate you may not be able to answer one, but it may be one that the applicant might be able to answer or might not, depending on how many football pitches he's aware of. So the question I wanted to ask officers, as you will be aware, a lot of this rests on the definition of the first test in policy G7 in the local plan. So nothing to do with the NPPF, nothing to do with anything else, just policy G7. And that policy G7 is, for everyone's benefit, is planning permission will not be granted for development in the loss of other trees, other opposed to ancient woodland or ancient and veteran trees, which we're not talking about here, in the loss of other trees, except in the following circumstances. A, it can be demonstrated that retention of the trees is not feasible. And so a lot rests here on the definition of feasible. Obviously, if the applicant says that this is the only route, as we've just heard, then we have to form our judgment on whether it's feasible or not on the basis of that. If they have decided to just not look at another route because they don't want to, is that the same as it being not feasible? So that's the first question. Second question is around L-shaped cycle tracks on sports fields, and it relates to the sports field at Croft Road, which I think we have a ward councillor here, so maybe the ward councillor can answer. It is my understanding that there is an L-shaped cycle track round the edge of the recreation field at Croft Road. There is a desire line which is visible at certain times of year, and I just checked and you can see it on a satellite map. It's not one created by cyclists, it's one created by pedestrians who walk in a straight line across the field when it's dry. Given that the gate at Meadow Lane will still be there, albeit it will be a kissing gate, so cyclists probably won't use it, but pedestrians will. What indication is there that the proposed cycle route just on one side will actually resolve the issue? In other words, are pedestrians going to cause a problem going across there, or is it entirely down to cyclists? So that was probably one for the three applicants to be pondering on, and then maybe come back for the G7 definition question.
No, I mean, thank you for the question. The major issue we have is with the cycle rut, and at the moment it's a 4-inch deep cycle rut, which if you have a 7-year-old football player run onto it, you have a broken ankle. So we're obliged to move all of our pitches 3 metres away from that. Yes, I don't think we will remove all of the people walking diagonally across, but at the moment the problem is much more with cyclists than it is with pedestrians.
Can I just come back on the as a ward councillor representing Croft Road? I think that what you've got there, say it's L-shaped, but because it is a nice hog-in surface, which is it's smooth and it's safe, so cyclists will always use that in preference to cutting across a field. You might find the same thing happens here, I don't know. But certainly that's my experience of Croft Road. It's safe and it's attractive. Whereas you get the sort of ruts and bumps if you cut across what might be a desire line otherwise.
Thank you. So in terms of policy G7, it does say planning permission will not be granted for development resulting in the loss or deterioration of ancient woodland or ancient or veteran trees. These trees aren't ancient woodland or veteran trees, so it complies with that part of the test. And then it obviously says it will not be permission will not be granted for development resulting in the loss of other trees, except where it can be demonstrated that the retention of the trees is not feasible. The scheme that is in front of us today is a path that runs along the southern boundary, and to get that scheme delivered, we are going to have to, it will result in the loss of some trees. So to deliver the scheme as we are determining today in front of us, we have to accept that it will result in the loss of some trees, and we can't get this scheme without it. Yes, other options have been considered, and the applicant has put together a pack which has gone through the alternative options, but we are not here to determine those other options. We are here to determine the scheme in front of us. This scheme has come forward. We, for the reasons outlined in the report and my presentation, deem the scheme to be acceptable and policy compliant, and therefore it's up for members to determine the application based on what is put in front of us, rather than the alternative options that may or may not be considered. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just to come in, the policy G7 just doesn't say that it must be demonstrated their retention is not feasible. It says it is not feasible and their loss will be mitigated. And so obviously there is mitigation work here in terms of the replanting, in terms of what that's delivering to mitigate their loss. So it's not just about being feasible, it's that their loss will be mitigated. And that's been demonstrated or set out in the report why we think that is the case.
Councillor Hunt, did you have? Okay, other questions?
While we're talking about trees, could you tell me what the age of the trees to be planted is? Because this will have an effect on how soon the canopy cover gets refreshed.
So it's my understanding that the trees will be heavy standard trees, so they will be about 2.5 to 3 metres tall and will have a girth of about 6 to 10 centimetres, is that correct? 8 to 10.
8 to 10 centimetres.
So they'll already be quite established as a tree as opposed to a stick in the ground.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
David, did you want to?
Thank you. I don't know what a veteran tree is. I mean,
I think the main point is that none of the trees here are veteran trees, so we don't really need to go and consider that.
none of these trees.
We can confirm that none of these trees are considered to be ancient trees or veteran trees.
So no.
So no.
You can.
I understand. Understanding there's a very minimal gain in terms of BNG. It's just one. Is that correct?
So in terms of habitat units, there'd be a net gain of 2.32%. And in terms of hedgerow units, there'd be a net gain of 1.06%.
Okay, so it really is a minimal. So when I contacted the body that helped me understand this in terms of biodiversity, they were explaining to me that there has to be a plus minus tolerance of 5%. As an engineer, I understand that. So if one is the expected outcome of the BNG, and you've got a tolerance of plus minus 5%, it's highly likely that the gain may be 0 or even less. And it's that tolerance that I have a problem with, whether there is actually a net gain in delivering this proposal.
Chair, that's a statement, not a question. And, you know, we can't comment on what other authority you may have contacted prior to the committee. The report sets out quite clearly the decision-making framework for the planning application in relation to BNG, sets out what the NPPF says, sets out where we're at. That's all set out in the report. I don't think we can expand on that any further than that. I can't comment on what other authorities may have given you.
How about any more questions on this? David?
Bollards that are a distance of 1.6 metres apart. Again, there are local concerns of electric cycles and motorcycles using that, and because Meadow Lane is a designated quiet space, is that how that will be mitigated? How will you stop the motorcycles using that pathway or the electric bikes creating that noise into the quiet lane?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the tree officer helped to sort of design that chicane feature, which will naturally slow bikes and other transport modes coming onto Meadow Lane. So that chicane helps do that, as well as the positioning of bollards. Obviously, it's a balance between the spacing of the bollards needs to allow for wheelchairs and prams and pushchairs through. But yeah, we're satisfied that the design of that, you know, is the best for all modes of transport. I mean, the highway, the county are all right with it as well, so.
Thank you. Okay.
Chair, I've really struggled with this application. I really-
Are we saying now, do we have any more questions? If not, we'll move into debate. Yeah, Alta, did you have a question? No.
I was just saying,
move
please
it.
move
Okay,
on
fine.
before we find out the age of trees and we get old.
Fine, well, okay, David, you want to make a point?
Well, the point was, I found it very, very difficult to get planning officers on site to discuss or to show me the layout and the concept of the proposal. And in fact, they didn't actually come out, and I had to go through a PowerPoint that took several weeks to develop. And the lack of consultation with local residents in this case, I mean, yes, we went through a period of consultation, I accept that, but that they have not accepted my invitation to go on site and meet local residents or even take me through the application.
Can I just jump in? Can I ask who you've contacted to meet you on site? Because as far as I'm aware, I've had no contact from yourself.
I'll show you the email thread.
To me as the case officer, or
I went through the planning department initially because at that time I didn't know who was responsible.
Okay.
I then received.
I'm sorry, but I think we're digressing here. You know, we've got an application on the table. My understanding is that all the full consultation did happen, and normally planning officers don't meet individual councillors on site, although sometimes we do organise site visits on complicated sites.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yeah, obviously, if such a meeting had taken place, David wouldn't be able to take part in the debate. So probably good job it didn't, I guess, from that point of view. For me, when we debated this last time, the issue was around that first test in policy G7. So to be completely clear on my views, I would very much like a cycle track across here. I would like it to be made of something that's not mud, which this isn't. It's got a good surface, just like the one that goes around Croft Road. And I would like the football pitches to not have a massive rut diagonally across them. So, and you can see quite what an effect it's having on some of the visuals. You know, you could get a whole load more pitches on there. There's a satellite view on Google Maps, which really rams home the point. So completely sympathise with the applicants, completely support the notion of the cycle track across there. The difficulty I have with this is the feasibility test in G7. I have not heard a convincing explanation. I heard an explanation, just wasn't completely convincing from the football club as to why this cycle track has to go in the direction it does and go out through the exit in the bottom left-hand corner of that slide and not carry on round just like the one in Croft Road does. And as the ward councillor says, the one in Croft Road, cyclists use it. They don't cycle across the middle of the grass. Yes, some people walk across, but they don't cycle across because there's a nice solid piece of track to go on. So I think what you would get if you laid it round is people cycling around the edge of the field, so you would no longer have the rut and you would no longer lose the trees. The number of trees, I mean, we had a slightly fruitless debate, which ignored the fact that willow trees are multi-stemmed, so they're inherently difficult to count anyway. And as I said, they could all be one tree, for all we know, if they go back far enough. The issue with though is the reasoning given for the choice of route through the trees out onto Meadow Lane in the southern corner, rather than going round to the existing entrance, which would involve probably zero loss of trees, is that is the feasibility test passed? And it wasn't for me last time, and it still isn't. I still don't understand why the application doesn't go round the rest of the route. I've heard some, frankly, fairly spurious reasons for objecting about the MPPF, and I've also I've never heard of a 5% toleration in the biodiversity calculation. That's entirely new to me, and I've just looked at the government guidance and find no record of it there. And that seems to me to be the definitive place to look. If it does exist, I'm sure we'll all learn something when we find out where it is. But on that basis, I think this is a breach of policy G7, even though it has very positive benefits against policy G5. We'll bring the pitches back into use, but I think you could do that on the alternative route. And it clearly has benefits in terms of policy M3, which is the provision of secure, safe, segregated, to use a word from an earlier debate, off-road cycle tracks. So on that basis, I've not changed my view, and I will be voting against.
Thank you. Louise and then Jemima.
But I cycle through it. Thank you. I cycle through it twice a day, pretty much. And I can tell you, cyclists definitely do cut off that corner sometimes. I mean, it is mainly walkers, but a lot of them do cut it off. And also, it's nothing like the extra distance that this if you had to do two sides of the triangle would be. It's actually it's the increase in length from doing the L shape rather than the diagonal is much less on Croft Road. I think here very clearly, if you can come in at the corner that you can there and leave at the corner you can over there, and you're on a bike, you are going to cut across as everybody does now. So I think the G7 test of is this the only feasible way of doing it, i.e. the route going along the southern boundary there, I absolutely think that is the only feasible way to do it, to get it so that people on bikes only go across there. If you've got the kissing gate up there, so you can't get your bike out up there, and you will then exit down on that bottom south western corner. So for me, I know they have looked at several different routes, they've examined several different routes. This to me clearly is by far the most sensible. So for me, I think it does satisfy G7. It's any other route that kept those trees is just not feasible. And okay, so we're going to lose some, and that is regrettable, but where it hasn't been feasible to keep them, as it says in B, they're going to mitigate that by planting new trees. And regardless of the number, if the tree officer is satisfied that that loss of 260 or so square metres worth of canopy is going to be re-provided, I mean, I honestly would imagine that where they've been removed, that gap itself is going to fill in quite quickly as the trees around it, as the willows split, etc. So I think it will probably be re-established there already, but happy days, we're actually going to have some extra trees planted around the edge as well. So plus some on Greyfriars School. So I will certainly be supporting this proposal. And unless lots of other people have got something they want to say, I would propose that we accept it with the attached conditions.
Thank you. But Jemima. David.
Yes, I would second that. I know this area well, and I have walked it with Chris Bell, one of the officers, and I fight tooth and nail to retain trees. As you know, we put it into the climate and scrutiny panel recommendation that all mature trees, mature trees are irreplaceable. However, as the mother of a footballer, we need those football, facilities, and actually SSMJ, the school there, which now has a school streets, which we're trying to get more and more kids to cycle to down Meadow Lane, and we're preventing parents from driving down Bedford Street. This is now one of the main routes for them to get to school. So I think it's critical, and I think it's, we need to do it, and it's great that it's finally happening.
So are you seconding?
Yes, I'm seconding.
You are. Okay. David, you wanted to come back in.
Yes, just a final comment from me, really. We're not allowed to discuss options or less designs that would have a less environmental impact on the site. That's unfortunate. I think there are schemes or ideas that would facilitate the playing of football, but at the same time preserve the tree line and provide access for cyclists at the same time. It's unfortunate that we can't have those plans in front of us, but because of the impact it's going to have on the locality and the visual impact on the green tunnel, as it's called in Iffley, I will be voting against this.
Also, just remind Councillor, all we can do is vote on whether we support this, the application in front of us, rather than any better schemes that we might think or vote around. This is the only one we can vote on.
Second.
Yeah. Proposed on the table to accept this, and this is seconded. Can I see all those in favour of the application? And all those against? 2. And one abstention.
Abstain.
Okay, so that is now carried. I'm now going to invite Councillor Fairweather to take over to deal with the last item and the minutes.
Well done.
Right, I think we're ready to consider the next planning committee item on the agenda. That's number 8, Dunstan Road. So I'll invite the planning officer to set out the report.
Thank you, Chair. So this application, it is a listed building consent application for 8 Dunstan Road. It's in the Old Marston Conservation Area. So, Old Headington. Sorry, I was just looking at Marston. Thank you. Apologies. It's a Grade 2 listed building. This follows an application that was taken to the last committee on the 17th of September, which was the planning application. It's for a small single-storey rear extension and some internal works, the listed building, hence the listed building consent application. The reason it's coming to committee, as we know, it's in Councillor Clarkson's property. So as I've mentioned, it lies in the Old Headington Conservation Area. It is opposite another listed building, so it's in the setting of a Grade 2 listed building. So we're looking at 2 designated heritage assets, the conservation area appraisal and the listed building itself. So this is a view from Dunstan Road. This is the front elevation. The works are related to a later outbuilding which is connected, and you can see it just on the right of the front elevation of the main building. This is an image of the rear of the building, and just next to the conservatory, the middle section, this is the area of the building that we're looking at, and it's been mostly rebuilt in the early 2000s. I should have said the property itself has some early 18th century remains, but it's predominantly a 19th century vernacular building. So this is a close-up. The extension would infill this area and next to the long run of windows. So you would have a sort of a dwarf wall and the windows continuing all the way along. These are some plans of the existing floor plans on the ground floor. And just to summarise the internal works, Although we have seen that quite a lot of the fabric in this part of the building is modern, there are some remains. And to summarise, we would be looking at converting an existing opening, an existing doorway into a window, and creating a new doorway into the TV room, rounding off that corner where the porch is and levelling up the floor to meet the existing. During the course of the application, we asked for a phasing plan just so we could understand the historic fabric, and we concluded that the areas that will be impacted are of low significance and to the point where the level of potential harm is no harm. So we are recommending approval of the listed within consent application, subject to the conditions proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's go on to questions. Has anybody got any questions about this proposed development? I don't see any questions. So has anybody got any comments they'd like to make?
I think it's an excellent report, and having gone through it thoroughly, the whole the detail of what's going to be done last planning committee, I think I feel sufficiently familiar with it that I am prepared to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and vote to approve this.
Seconded.
So we have a proposal on the table to accept the officer's recommendation, and it has been seconded, so I think we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So the officer's report has been accepted. Just follow on to the next item on the agenda, which is the minutes of the last meeting. This one doesn't seem to have page numbers on it, but I'll read out the items. Item 28, any comments? Item 29, any comments? Item 30, item 31, item 32, or item 33. Okay, so I think that means we can approve the minutes of the meeting of the 17th of September. Forthcoming applications, which are listed at the end of the current agenda. Has anybody got any comments about them? Noted. Thank you. And dates of future meetings. Anybody want to mention anything about that? Okay. In that case, we will note the dates of future meetings and end this meeting. Thank you all very much.